everyone. Welcome to the regular meeting of the Governing Board of the Office of Inspector General and, Board of Office of the Inspector General and the Ethics Office. The Governing Board is an independent, citizen-nominated board that works to ensure honesty, integrity, accountability, and trust in city government. The board meets every third Thursday of the month at 6 p.m., unless otherwise specified. The board is composed of city residents, persons employed within the city, or persons with business interests within the city who are nominated by public interest groups and confirmed by City Council to serve a 3-year term of office. All board members are community volunteers who receive no pay for their service. They are two seats to my left, nominated by the Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, Rebecca Brubaker. To my far left, Lisa Lang, nominated by the Atlanta Bar Association. To my immediate left, Todd Gray, nominated by the Atlanta Business League. To my far right, Richard Taylor, nominated by the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board. To my immediate right, Terry Simmons, nominated by the Gate City Bar Association. To my 2 seats to my right, Cecily Welsh, nominated by the Georgia Society of CPAs. To my 3 seats to my left, Natalie Lewis, nominated by the Association of Certified Fraud Examiners. And to my far right, Andrew Cohen, nominated by the 7 major universities. My name is Nicola Hines, and I'm nominated by the League of Women Voters for Atlanta-Fulton County. The Inspector General, Shannon Manigault, and the Ethics Officer, Jabu Sangova, are present, and a quorum is present tonight. Let's begin with the first order of business, which is the adoption of the agenda. Do we still need a change?
So moved.
Is there any discussion?
I'd like to make a motion to move the order of the agenda board operations to start at 6:10 p.m. I believe Ethics has agreed to yield their time. Is this no longer necessary?
No longer necessary?
Okay,
Okay.
never mind.
Any other further discussion? Okay, hearing none. All those in favor to adopt the agenda as present, say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Say nay. Any abstentions? Hearing none, the agenda has been adopted unanimously. Next is minutes from the July 18th board meeting. This is an action item.
I move to approve the July minutes.
Second.
It has been moved in second. Is there any discussion about the minutes from July 18th, 2024? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Hearing none. The minutes from the July 18th, 2024 meeting has passed unanimously. Next on the agenda is board operations. We have a presentation from Chief of Staff, Mr. Odie Donald, Office of the Mayor.
Well, good evening. How are y'all doing today?
Good evening.
Yeah, let's see. I'm going to adjust this a little bit. And do I have the presentation on the screen?
And Mr. Donald, did we get any copies for the board to read?
Not sure.
While we're waiting for the presentation to arise, Mr. Donald, we didn't get the email with the presentation. Is there someone in your office who could possibly bring some copies down so we can?
Yeah, so I think Ms. Singova, who it was sent to, I'm pretty sure that's what she said she was leaving to do. Would you like her asking us to print them?
Yeah, since we didn't get ahead of time, that would be great. Thanks.
Somebody
Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Sangova. Ms. Sangova, is that a clicker for the TV? That's the recording? Okay, he was asking for.
Good evening, everyone. We apologize for the delay. Small technical difficulty, but we are trying to get it up for you all. If you just bear with us, we apologize.
Mayor. I have not had a chance to join y'all yet, but have definitely watched your work and wanted to just kind of represent the mayor's office today to give an update on some of our recent activities as well as some of our conversations, make sure that the public is fully in the loop and aware of some of the activities that are happening in the administration to foster a culture of ethical government, which again, I think is a very important topic. I know that that's something that you guys breathe and live every day as a part of your board, and we, as a part of the administration, are in that same boat. I'll start off for the edification of the public. You guys know most of this information, and this is a very similar presentation that I gave to the Committee on Council just a few weeks back. So first, just giving, you know, a little bit of historical context, because the slate of play for ethical government is very different, and Atlanta, like 13 other places, is okay. I think they record it on the television too, so it'll be a good playback. So I'll tell you, you know, I'll get back to it. 13 different municipalities now have an Office of Inspector General. Atlanta is the newest of those. And, you know, the first one back in 1873 when the world was very, very, very different. I probably couldn't, you know, address a distinguished body like this back in 1873. You know, that group was birthed out of the Boss Tweed scandal, which kind of serves of a historical example of why independent oversight and accountability are crucial for ethical government. And Atlanta as a whole, and definitely this administration, supports that. Since that time, way back in 1873, been a lot of legislation, a lot of activities, a lot of actions, you know, all across these United States, and especially right here in the South. 12 other municipal governments, as I've mentioned, including the city of Atlanta, which was also birthed from some challenges with scandal that occurred prior to this administration. The process for appointing the Office of Inspector General or Inspector Generals in general is very different across the board. I think you'll see there are some, including in our state, you know, where those are done by the executive over administrations, others by legislative appointment, others by judicial appointment. And then you have Atlanta, which is a unique process. So Atlanta's board appointment process is really designed, I believe, to be one of the most independent and one of, you know, the most thoughtful in the nation. It looks like we learned from the previous 12. And so that is very important, and it is what makes Atlanta unique. And how we do anything is really how we do everything, and we do it with that unique flavor and eye to make sure that we have continuous quality improvement in government. It is important to note that the process of how these IGs are appointed and whom they report to, you know, impacts the day-to-day operations and the relationship that is had with the administration as well as these other bodies. And so if you, let's say, have one under the executive arm, then, you know, there are different nuances. You don't have to worry as much about the chain of custody or attorney-client privilege and things of that nature. But there are some things that come up when, you know, you've done it the way that we do that, you know, has kind of, I believe, caused maybe some conflict or some gray area that maybe the legislation is not as clear on here because the structure significantly impacts kind of the effectiveness of communication and coordination. And so that's something that I'll put a pin in and continue and expand on as I go through the presentation. Atlanta, as I mentioned, is quite different. You know, our government and our structure, one of the oldest in Georgia and has had a lot of different change. And I think to get to where we are now, our ethical ecosystem really includes everyone. It's not the way it always was, but definitely how it is now. And everyone plays a role, including our citizens. It's not exempt, though. So you have this esteemed body, you have the ethics office, and you have the OIG. But there's also a responsibility of participating in this ethical ecosystem from the administration, from our city council, as well as human resources and law department. And sometimes we don't always include them in those conversations, but they're two of our most important. HR is where our employees can file complaints about working conditions and treatment. It's my understanding that this board doesn't necessarily oversee some of those functions. So let's say the ethics office and the OIG both have staff members. Well, those folks would file complaints if they had issues with either of those bodies with HR, just as someone under my tutelage or oversight and any other department or office would do. So HR plays a very important role. The same with our law department. Our law department is kind of our check and balance system to protect the city from violations of state, federal, and local laws. Again, very important roles that they both uniquely have that are outside of, kind of they're within the oversight and jurisdiction, but they have roles in which they have the oversight and jurisdiction as well. Just important to note. Another important piece, I love Atlanta. I'm from here, born and raised. I just got to say that. So I'm always excited because Atlanta is I call it a market leader in just about everything, and ethical government is no different. So, about 22 years ago, back in 2002, and man, it sounds like a long time ago, but I remember 2002, and I was very different then. But in these last 22 years in which Atlanta has kind of been a trailblazer for ethical government, set the path forward and the framework for what we're doing today. But there's been some change. There's actually, as you'll see from this slide, I'll give you some time to look at it. I'm not sure if they brought you your copies yet, but when you look at it, there have been 12 different actions that have taken place since that time in 2002, with the most recent being the 2020 implementation and creation of the OIG's office. And then the next piece is after creating that office, there was a decision to kind of separate the duties and powers of the OIG and the ethics office and give them both independence as two offices, both under your oversight. So those changes are important because they have, different impacts as you make these adjustments. And we could imagine since 1873, New York, I was reading, just had some additional changes back in 2023. So, there are hundreds of years of being in existence, they're still making adjustments and changes to make sure that the people benefit the most from these offices that are created. I will tell you, I think this is my 9th government that I've had an opportunity to serve as an executive in. There's a lot of different experiences, but I am truly excited to be here representing Mayor Dickens today because his focus is really aligned with yours. And I think that's why I chose to come here. I had a really good job. I think we were doing really great work. We were serving an excellent community that's also one of the fastest growing in the country. But I think these 4 pillars are what really sold me on joining this team. And not coincidentally, what you'll see is that 4th pillar, and there's not a 1 through 4, there's no priority. These are our marching orders. But when he entered into government, his administration had 4 focuses, and it's no coincidence that one of them is ethical and efficient government, and ensuring that Atlanta's success is directly tied to how much confidence our residents have in how we deliver services and how we do business. So I think I've said it before, but I've also heard some of the mumbling and bumbling and different rumors in the street committee and all of that stuff that I'm sure y'all have heard too. I want to say unequivocally, we support the office of the OIG. As a matter of fact, I'm wearing my pin just like y'all have, stand with the OIG. I'm going to have a fairly long presentation, so I won't technically stand, but when I walk out of here, I'll stand strong and hold my fist up as well. So we're all standing with the OIG together. We're also holding everyone accountable. That's not exclusive to anyone. And so we are all responsible for every day getting better. We're not perfect. Today I was 10 minutes late, so tomorrow I got to be on time. I had plenty of reasons traffic in Atlanta can be very interesting, but when I'm supposed to be somewhere at 9 o'clock, I've got to be there at 9 o'clock. And it's my job to improve every day. That goes for legislation, that goes for how we manage, I think how we deal with other people, all of those things. And so I think that's a big part of our administration is focus on being the ethical leader when we look at that pillar. And I think we've made, a few strides in that direction. If you look at this piece, I don't want it to get lost because I think we believe that it is very important that we aim for the gold star. That's why I've got it there in the corner. I'm not great with PowerPoint, but I can do a little something. And so that gold star is actually really important to me because it is my guidance that is our aim, perfection. And so right now we are getting very, very close to where we had 100% compliance of that 90% goal. 100% of our 27 departments actually met that 90% threshold or more. Very important for us because that's a part of the standard that's been set, and to my knowledge, it's the first time in history that that's been done. Now that we've hit that check mark, we've got to move from 90% to 100%, so that includes everybody. So that's our next goal. We've also, and I think this is a very important part, and you don't usually think about, most people, I guess, don't think about equity and ethics, in the same breath. But for us, they're one and the same, and that's very important. And it goes back to that HR role, and our focus on people is making sure that folks have that access, and within our ethical ecosystem, we want to make sure that folks access, that their protection, and that their knowledge and education rivals everything else that we do. The other piece in that continuous quality improvement piece is to go above and beyond where you as a body and others require. We want to take the next step. That's why the mayor has partnered with what some regard as one of the best trainers in our state, which is the University of Georgia and the Carl Vinston Institute of Government. 150 of our senior-most leaders will be trained on the ethics code, ethical government, but in addition to that, they'll also be put into scenarios that are a little bit difficult, and it makes them identify whether they're making the right decision or not. Can you attend this football game? Can you talk and communicate during blackout periods? All of those things that, there's not really a format for which people are trained on. And so we're taking the additional step to make sure to do that. And it always starts at the top, which is why our 150 senior-most leaders are participating in this effort. In addition to that, and I do think we're on the right track. We're not perfect, and I know that our various teams are at work, but I believe as of the 18th, we've had some pretty good success. We have over 14,000 procurement transactions, an employee base of almost 10,000, and to date, we have about 47 findings. So that is about 0.5%. Of those transactions and activities have a finding. Now, there may be other recommendations that are, that we should look at and consider incorporating, but I think findings are the thing that you want to make sure that you fully eliminate. And so, as of that date, we were at about 0.5%. I think when you also look at some of those procurement transactions, we're at less than 0.5% of those findings. And so, but that means that it's not perfect. And those are very important areas. And we are striving and will reach for and must reach perfection because our citizens demand and deserve it. So I want to make sure that we are not only in lockstep with you on that, it is our focus just as well as it is yours, which is why I wanted to make sure we put that in writing and present that today. Now, with all of this, I think, our OIG, who I, believe is very talented, has the opportunity to meet a few times. And during those meetings, as well as in public comment to our council, she highlighted some of the challenges that she believes that she was facing and said that the office was facing an emergency. That's important. we have to respond to emergencies. And we have done so, and we have a record of doing so, and sometimes to our detriment, we have done such a good job at it that people forget that those things were emergencies. One example is the COVID pandemic. We're not really talking about that anymore in Atlanta, and part of that is because of the city of Atlanta's response, and in no small way to our mayor and his investments in everything from public safety, maternal health, and many other areas. We also, we're facing the succession of buckhead from our city limits. That's an emergency, when your city shrinks. And so we also attacked and faced that with the vigor necessary that you do with emergencies. And of course, when entering office, this administration was facing a severe rise in violent crime, another major emergency for which we made some announcements recently that violent crime is down quite a bit. We've also recently faced the extensive water main breaks, which is another emergency. I won't go through all of them, but I think you'll see by our responses, our contributions to the public, and our focus on things, if it's important to the people, it's important to us. And so you best believe that when there's an emergency, you can rest assured that this administration will respond. And so we take those public comments and those requests very seriously, which is why, in part, I'm here with you today. Now, I would be remiss if I did not highlight that as we face this climate and we try to work together, there are differences of opinion and there are areas that I believe are gray areas. Won't be new to all of you because we have met and gone over these things, but I also think it's very important to put things on the public record, and you do so more than once. And so as we partner with the OIG's office, with the ethics office, as well as with your board, it's very important to be transparent. I want to make sure that we're doing so. I think I read a letter that you guys collectively sent that I'm assuming you recently took action on and forwarded to us that highlights some of the things that y'all wanted and to make sure that there was transparency and no misrepresentations. So we're going to be very clear tonight to make sure that these representations are what they are. And so what this area of concerns are, these are the administration's areas, which we have expressed to the OIG, we've expressed to your board, we've also expressed those to the Committee on Council for which they took action, and I'll reiterate those here today. I can go through all of them, but I also know I'm taking up a little bit of your meeting, so I'll highlight some of them, and if you want more, you have them in front of you, and we can always arrange a time to come back. But one key area that we have highlighted, and let me be clear on one thing, these are areas of concern. Doesn't mean the administration is right. Doesn't mean that the OIG is right. Board has not officially on record through a public vote or through public conversation and an action taken any position on those since we've had these conversations, which again is why the administration has. But tonight I want to make sure that we frame that appropriately. The public is aware, you're aware, and everyone is aware. And so the lack of review of authorization for an investigation is an area of concern for us. It appears that the board isn't always aware of the institution of an investigation or the basis to open an investigation. Like, what is that standard that we use to define whether an investigation should be opened or implemented? And who is the body who, decides that and oversees that? The assumption prior to some of our meetings is that that would be the board, as you are an individual oversight body, and those who report to you, you are the people that they report to. But from my understanding, those investigations aren't necessarily brought before y'all. So, not sure how that works, but that's an area of concern. I think we need some clarity on it so that we can make sure to abide by the rules in the playing field. Another one is a perceived violation of personal space. Interviews are conducted with employees at the interview's home or other non-work locations on occasion, in some of the reports that we have received, which require the employee to exit their home and consent to an interview. That would be without a witness, without legal counsel and things of that nature. Not sure if those things have fully happened, but we have got some reports of those. We've expressed those concerns and not sure that we are on the same page on whether that is allowable or not. So we need some clarity on areas like that. I also need some clarity on, the lack of access to legal representation. I had a great meeting with the OIG, so I want to make sure we highlight that as well. So from us, the perception, our understanding is that the Inspector General does not allow city attorneys to be present even when city actions are involved, which was illuminated by the office recently requesting that a personal attorney also leave the room. Now, in our conversations, in our meeting, that may have been an oversight, and so we reported it to the OIG. She's been extremely responsive, and so I'm certain that if that is the case, then, those type of things won't happen anymore. But there are instances where you would believe if you're doing city business, you would be represented by the city attorney until such time that it's identified that you should not be and that the city attorney should be able to weigh in and understand that. That may not be the right course, but we believe it is, and we need someone to be the adjudicator to tell us that, and apparently that's not in the legislation. It's not clear, and the bylaws of the board and other documents don't actually explicitly address that. Device seizure, which I think we've had correspondence from the board, because I noticed that y'all said that we did not come before the board to meet with you, and the ask was made. I actually spoke with Ms. Hines about that, and the former city attorney declined to attend that meeting, but instead provided a document. I never responded because I didn't receive it, and so it was not a brush off of the board. We want to make sure to appear anytime you love us to, so I want to make sure we make that clear, and since we talked about it in private, I want to make sure that that's on the record in public as well. And so as we look at those things, that device seizure, while it was resolved because those devices were returned, there were months that went by while we were trying to figure that out. And if those things could easily be adjudicated and there was a way to kind of call balls and strikes and understand what our responsibility is versus, let's use in this example, the OIG or ethics office responsibility, make it very easy for us to kind of coordinate a little bit better. Why that's important is because of things like chain of custody, right? So if you're hacked or something of that happens, you are covered by these companies that you do your independent, IT management with. Well, we have an experience very recently around the time that the OIG was created back in 2020 where the city of Atlanta was, hacked by cyber threats, and it was pretty expensive and kind of crippled the city for a little while. So those type of things are really valid pieces that we need clarity and understanding on. I mentioned the lack of criteria for standard of review, so it doesn't look that there's at least not public, because they have not been able to find it, the standard procedure or criteria approved by the board as to when an investigation should be initiated, and so the discretion is left solely to the OIG without oversight of these decisions. So that's something that I think, we'd like to have weighed in on and understand how that process works. And so I'll highlight some of those challenges and things that we're not, fully, in agreement on, and we need to understand who makes that decision. An example of this would be the senior ball from 2022, one of our early reports that we received from both the OIG and the ethics office. And so when you look at the way that occurred, back in August, we received, and I've got the dates up there for folks, but we received the report, let's say it's 2 o'clock, whatever time it is, and before we could actually respond, it was actually, the report was sent out to the press and media, and the city had not had a chance to review or respond to the report. Usually, and the OIG operates differently and ethics operates differently than, let's say, an audit, But during an audit, as you close it, you would have a conference and you would identify areas of challenge and things of that nature, and then you would close it out. You'd have an opportunity to respond before and after. And so when do these investigations close? Do they close simply when you close them and give us the recommendations? And how do we respond to that? In this instance, we did not agree with the findings of the OIG and highlighted some of those areas, including the transparency efforts to create a trust fund, many of the our invoicing process that has changed. It's included in my letter, and I would like to submit that so that as you include it in the minutes here. And so I brought that as well. But following that letter, during the process, the OIG referred it to ethics, and ethics actually had a very different opinion than the OIG did, which for us, we want to make sure we're responsive. We want to make sure that we're in compliance. And most importantly, we want to make sure that we improve these processes. And so as we do that, not knowing the playing field and how we respond and how we measure these improvements is a challenge. And so this is one, but there have been a few others. But there's also been times where we receive these recommendations and we put those things into action. And so we really want to make sure that we clear up any of these gray areas that exist. To do so, we have met with both the OIG as well as the board. And so I've listed all of our meetings here. These meetings have been, whether it be one-on-one with the OIG, whether it's been with subsets of the board. And I'd highlight that as well, because I think I noticed that in your letter yesterday as well, where you mentioned complying with our small group meeting request. So first, we want to make sure that we hear from the board, and I'll highlight your board actions because we've, followed those to try to make sure that we understand and we're in compliance with the oversight board. It's very important. OIG is valuable, and we need that support, that guidance, and those recommendations. The same for the ethics office. I mean, when we are trying to make sure we're in line, we often send requests to understand, hey, is this ethical? Is this not? Is this allowed? We want to make sure that we have that open line of communication. And so we also open that with the board. I want to make sure for the edification of the public, the reason we had small group meetings is because we were trying to understand what occurred. And if you had a meeting with the full board, you had to notice that for the public. Whenever you meet as a quorum, whenever you come together as a quorum and you make a decision, which I'm sure all of you know, you have to notice it to the public, and you have to be able to provide your agenda, your meeting notes, and all of those things. And so this was an opportunity for us to hear from you and understand what challenges you had before the administration. Y'all had gone before the council and asked for some things, and there were some adjustments made and maybe some not made. And so we wanted to make sure we understood what those were, as well as express some of our challenges. And so I want to make it clear, because I want to highlight that we had those meetings, and in my previous presentation, I listed those dates, and so I'm listing them here as well. Now, our last meeting, I think, with you guys was on June 6th, and May 20th, our OIG eloquently came before public comment and highlighted this emergency. And so our first action is, again, coming before the board. It is also important just to highlight, coming forward on expertise and things of that nature. This is your board composition. And so since the beginning, when this board was created, back when it was the ethics office, you had 5 attorneys on the board. And now I think you have 3 slots that are required to be filled by attorney. I believe you may know this. I'm not sure how you're going to rectify it. But currently, you actually only have 2 attorneys on the board, even though the legislation requires 3. And so for us, we want to make sure that you have all of the support that you need to be able to provide oversight, function within the laws and the rules and regulations, especially because we are responsible for kind of working together and making sure we're in line with all of these activities. So I wanted to highlight that and just highlight this group that we've been able to meet with over time. I think we did a virtual and we did one in person because of scheduling and things of that nature, but was able to do that, and also wanted to highlight that piece as well. I also wanted to highlight that since that time, we are in a certain extent, responsible for one, reacting, because the request to resolve these issues and remove any forms of perceived or real obstruction or any type of roadblocks has to be done. Our first stop is always going to be you as the board, because you are the governing body. But emergencies cannot sit idle. And so when we look back at the actions related to the board from September until your last minutes that are showing are July, for these issues, there has been no action taken. And so I did receive, and I'll highlight your letters, because I just don't see the minutes from the meeting listed. And so I know to take action as a board, because I think y'all are under the Open Meetings, Open Records Act in the same way you are, you would have had to take an action, vote on it, and then forward it to us. I just didn't list it because I did not see where your public meeting occurred prior to seeing that, because we would look at those minutes and then respond accordingly. But what you would see here is that from September through July, there's no action, but we have an emergency and we have some stated issues that we have to clean up. So I wanted to make sure that we make that clear, because inaction could be detrimental at the end of the day to our citizens and the public trust. And so you should know that this administration is always going to make and take action to support, those type of activities, especially ethical activities. I did want to highlight, because I've gotten your board correspondence, and so I think this was the correspondence, and I would like to make sure we enter, this as a part of the minutes as well. But your board correspondence, I believe after our first meeting, and I believe you guys highlighted some different areas in which you wanted to make sure that, we responded to. And some of them were related to the operations of the board, and some of them were, in general, you wanted to make sure that our staff was trained by subject matter experts as well on OIG offices and ethical government. And so we've taken the first step in that. The first thing we did is the Carl Vinson Institute of Government training that I told you, which has come before. We announced it. We actually consulted with the ethics officer before doing so to make sure that we provided a quality product that our senior leaders could benefit from. So that's step one. And we also plan to make sure that we bring forward some of those subject matter experts, both in the task force and within that process. And I'll go deeper into that here in a minute. And so you have been heard, but you did not take an official action. And so we are responding and taking that action. And so the first one is the Carl Vinson Institute of Government training. So I just wanted to make sure that our top 150 senior leaders are being trained on how to be more ethical, because we agree with you, that is important. And also the subject matter expertise is important as well. And I'll get to that shortly. The other, I think there are 3 letters. You have them, but I included them so they could easily be included in the record. And I think this is the last one, and this is the one I could not find the meeting minutes for. It was the letter that you sent yesterday, signed by the full board, which I'm assuming authorized the letter. And I also noticed that someone abstained, so there should be a public vote associated with that as well, which is where you ask some of these questions, which I'm hoping to answer right now, which is, the letter that you sent to us yesterday, which we will respond to, but we just got it yesterday, but I did want to include it as a part of the minutes and the record here. And so we have heard from you, and we want to make sure I'll highlight how we are incorporating that. But of course, as a board, you can always take action and do other things without us. But we want to make sure we're partners, which is why we called and asked for the meetings to get your insights and why I'm here today. The other piece that I think is very important is around protecting employee rights. And I think that's something that we want to make sure. That's one of our our top 3 goals within ethical government. I think the first thing is making sure that we comply with all the rules and the regulations of our government, everything that is in the code. Number 2 is making sure that we have an equitable environment where everybody has access to the same things, the opportunities for success, and to be able to coordinate. And then number 3, that continuous quality improvement, really around the customer experience. And in this instance, our customer is human resources and our more than 9,500 employees. And so here I've just kind of listed out some of the employee rights that we want to make sure we preserve, and that the lens is on those, because as we hold people accountable, we also have to make sure that we provide them all of the due process necessary and all of the respect that they deserve for all of the work that they provide to our citizens. And so we want to make sure that they have the right to legal representation. Very important to make sure that there's a witness or legal representation when it's appropriate to do so. And when that appropriateness is there, we need to know, because that gray area kind of exists. And when you don't agree, you have to figure out a way to resolve a problem. And again, I think our first step in resolving these disagreements are around coming to the board. And so I believe that y'all have, talked about the issue amongst yourselves and you're really looking at it strongly and giving us some good recommendations around training, but these issues still exist, and we got to make sure that they get resolved. Making sure employees have the right to not be approached or harassed at their home, if that's true. Making sure that they have the right, not to have their statements used in a civil investigation that we compel them to comply to. I think that's a gray area, and we, of course, have to figure it out. But our legislation does require all of our employees to participate and comply in investigations. So we got to make sure that that environment also protects them as they go through the process. And then making sure that employees have the right not to have their personal and financial information accessed without a validly issued subpoena. I know those have been some challenges. I know even with the iPro, I'll be pretty forthcoming. One of the iPro reports, my social was released. That's bit concerning, so we want to make sure those type of activities, don't occur and don't happen. Employees have the right not to have their personal property, cell phone, computers, et cetera, taken without either a legal warrant or some type of agreed upon process. So all of those things that we want to make sure are resolved and that they're done. And so to do so, we kind of thought, how do we resolve this? We've met with different staff members. We've met with the board. Hasn't really been any actions taken, and the administration doesn't really create legislation. That's the policy arm, which is the council. And so we took those concerns that I've gone through in great detail tonight, and we took those to the council, and we requested that the task force be formed. And so this task force, I believe is a very strong group of very seasoned individuals with unique experiences. So you have Mr. Howard Shook, and I'm sorry, I said Mr., I meant Council Member Howard Shook, who is the Dean of the Council, as well as Council Member Marcy Overstreet. They also have the unique distinction of being a part of the public trust that helped to create the OIG office. So as legislators, they are very, well positioned to sit on this task force and kind of oversee, monitor, and look at the work. In addition to that, different subject matter experts, are some of the best and the brightest considered not only in Georgia but across the globe. You have the former general counsel and, for the governor. And, the governor actually is the appointing authority for the OIG at the state level. So a unique experience there, and also oversees regulatory and economic development issues in the private sector now. Ms. Justice Leah Ward Sears, who was the Chief Justice of the Georgia Supreme Court, of course, very unique experience, but also served as the chairwoman of the body that actually created this office. Have Mr. Norman Brothers, who not only served as a lawyer in our military with distinctive honors, but also for Global Behemoth and one of the largest, I believe the largest employer in the city. You have Mr. Richard Dean, who I think his reputation precedes him. He was the district attorney for the Northern District, and that group was responsible for uncovering wrongdoing at the city of Atlanta and oversaw that work. I believe Mr. Pack was there at that time, but he held that role with distinction and has also served as a federal prosecutor. You also have a former assistant DA and federal prosecutor, and District 62 representative, Ms. Tanya Miller. And so that group of 7 is very uniquely positioned to help us figure out, these gray areas and how do we resolve them. But they're not where the buck stops. And so while it has not been done on the record, we have received the request for having folks like the OIG, the Association of OIGs weigh in, and having other folks like the Georgia Municipal Association and many other, people who would look at ethical government and how to get it right and do it right in practice. And so, as well as the board, the OIG, as well as the ethics officer will all be invited into this process. But we also want to make sure, and I'm telling you this today, but the board will take action and give us direction on how to do so, because those things should be done in a public meeting where people can see it, understand it, and see the process. And so that is forthcoming. In addition, I'll just leave this there. There are 3 big areas that have been asked of the task force to look at. So making sure about, looking at the procedure and framework around investigations, examining the City of Atlanta's charter so that those gray areas can be resolved and kind of strengthened so that they are not concerns moving forward. So everybody knows, again, what's a ball and what's a strike, so that we can call those things appropriately and we can be responsive. Because then, again, I've probably said it 10 times, the city of Atlanta, the whole city of Atlanta, but I can speak on behalf of our administration, we believe that we need the Office of the Inspector General, that we need the OIG, we need the Ethics Office, but we also need to know what the balls and strikes are and what the playing field is so that we can be compliant. Because if we don't have an ethical government in which not only us as leaders, but every employee understands, then we haven't really delivered for our citizens. And so that is important, and we want to use this process to make sure that we provide that. And so with that, I'll pause. I think there's a little bit of time for questions, comments, or anything of that nature. But I would just close by saying, I heard the rumors of, we don't want an OIG. Can't have an ethical mayor who has made ethical government one of his pillars and that go forward. That is completely false. So let me unequivocally say that here. We want the Office of the Inspector General, we want the Ethics Office, and we welcome the oversight. We do want to know what the playing field looks like, and we want to make sure that non-biased subject matter experts are, making those decisions, and that everybody who you like invited into the process, including folks that we like invited into the process, are included. So, again, thank you very much for allowing me to come before you today, and I got a little bit of time for some questions if you have them. I also have Madam City Attorney who is here with me as well, and she may be able to answer some of those questions also.
Before questions, I just want to, your calendar, just for a record. We met, the May 2nd one was actually you and I virtually.
Got it. Okay.
And then June was the virtual in person. So I just want to make sure that's
both
correct.
of them.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then we did have a meeting with the past city attorney, senior advisor, and I believe the COO
Yeah, I think
in
that's
January.
on there.
In January.
Yeah, well, I only did from the previous year since these issues were brought forward,
Okay.
but you're right.
There was a January meeting, so I just want to make sure the
Absolutely.
calendar
Yeah.
is accurate.
Got it.
Okay. So I will open it up to the board if they have questions, comments. Well, I know you referenced the letters and saying you were looking for minutes and stuff. So we did the conversation via electronically. I will yield to either my ethics or IG if we need to download those emails to put it in record, but it was basically a Google email with comments that started, and then, the conversations were back and forth via our public email addresses.
Okay.
So, I mean, there was not a physical meeting.
So it wasn't a physical vote.
No.
There wasn't a.
It was an electronic conversation. Yes, here's the letter. Go into Google, make your changes, your thoughts, put your comments in, agree, disagree, all that stuff. We finalized the letter, sent it out, finalized, say, here's the final letter. Is everyone good with it? Everyone who said they were good with it said yes via the email. We had one board member who abstained, and then we put that footnote that they abstained in the letter. So there was not a convening in terms of an open meeting act. So I just want to make sure that's also clear with the public.
So I'm just curious. I guess I'd love to hear from somebody to weigh in as well. But I would think before you take an action of the board, which would be a letter authorized by the full board, because you're not individuals, you would actually take a formal action of the board to authorize, execute the letter, and then distribute it. And for someone to abstain, they would have to vote to abstain.
Well, like I said, via email. And like I said, if we have to download emails, there was not a public meeting in terms of we sat in a room and said, hey, let's write a letter, let's communicate. It was all done electronically via our city email addresses. With the conversation, is this fine to go out? Do we want it to go out? Some of the, I believe most of the board members did put approved, approved meaning they approved the letter and for it to go out. So
Understood.
I'll yield to whoever we need to submit those documents, but we were not in person.
Actually, that is a violation of the Open Meetings
Okay.
Act. But what you can do in order to correct that is now you can ratify the action that you took while you're in an open meeting that's been noticed. The problem was you didn't notify anybody that you were having a discussion about a letter. So no one in the public had an opportunity to hear your informal votes. But you can correct it now.
Okay, I appreciate it. Like I said, this is kind of new territory for us, of communicating. So we just want to make sure also, as the governing board of the Office of Inspector General and Ethics, that we are
want to make sure we
transparent.
get that right.
And I don't
y'all
want
are
you guys
giving
inferring
oversight.
that we are having hidden meetings,
Okay.
right? Like we're not having hidden meetings and stuff. So, for us to be able to communicate, as you stated, we're not city employees. It's not like we see each other to kind of pass in the hallway and say, hey, we don't have those conversations or those opportunities. So as this is a learning curve for our board also of how to communicate, it's also hard to convene on a regular basis. As we stated, we are unpaid volunteers that meet, once a month or so. So, so we thought the best way was to basically use our city email addresses to have that conversation, which is subject to open records if somebody wanted to pull it. So.
Listen, I'll leave that one be.
Okay.
Wow. Okay.
But I just didn't want you to think it was, referred to that we were having
I would have to
meetings.
say it's a little surprising and a little, because I know that you're supposed to be providing oversight, and understanding how to comply with the Open Records, Open Meetings Act is a very important part of this role. And so,
Yeah.
managing that process and making sure that we're very transparent to the public is vital. And we do not want to it is important that we do not betray the public trust. And so I think Madam City Attorney gave some great
and
advisement.
that's fine.
But
yes,
we
thank you so much for the advisement. Yes, thank you.
Hear to that. Okay.
And Mr. Donald, I just want to thank you for, am I on? Am I on? Okay. Just want to thank you for coming today, and also to our mayor for providing the statements and the presentation of which you did. I'll speak directly that, it's important that, we stand with the OIG, we stand with the ethics office, and also this governing body and this governing board. The model that we have here in the city of Atlanta and the 7 nominating organizations is a best practice model, and it does secure our independence. I am personally in support of taking action and letting the facts be the facts. So I look forward to working with the task force. I'm sure the members of the board do as well, the OIG and also the ethics officer, and then the recommendations of the best practice organizations that were mentioned as well. Yeah. So thank you for the presentation, and action must be taken.
Mr. Donald,
Yes,
I
ma'am.
would also like to thank you for your time here today. As you have publicly stated and wanted to make sure that you indicated the actions that the mayor's office and administration has been moving forward. I also thought that I believe it is important to indicate that it's not that the board has had inaction. You know that we have had multiple smaller meetings where we have expressed that there are some significant misunderstandings as to the role of what the OIG does. Specifically, your areas of concern that you've listed here, we did discuss those in some of our meetings.
Absolutely.
That it's intentional. We are not supposed to be involved in the individual investigations that are occurring, as well as our concerns with maintaining confidentiality, because even the statistics that you've provided show that less than 0.5% of investigations result in findings. Therefore, it is critical that we maintain confidentiality throughout, which does not, and that means that some of the typical areas of reporting can't happen because that would violate confidentiality. But as you've discussed, and as we as a board have mentioned on multiple occasions, the ability to have learning sessions, which we have been attempting to do for 6 months or so. So I do want to specifically state that I respect your perspective and your what we've discussed here, but stating that we have not made action, I would not characterize that as being 100% accurate.
Yeah.
And as we are looking at the task force and all of us moving forward and how we make sure that our office is doing what it needs to do and our board is doing what it needs to do, I think it's important that we ask and make a determination on perhaps expanding the task force. There were a significant number of people and experts in the field specifically of operations and processes of an OIG versus the general understanding of this is what we want them to do and don't want them to do. I believe that it would be appropriate to have on such a task force, as we have listed before and have presented, specific people who do this work and are experts in the field on the actual operationalizing of it, because I believe that that is a significant portion of the misunderstandings that have been occurring.
May I respond?
Please.
Yeah, so I think, again, I mentioned that I listed those meetings so that folks know that we've had it and we've talked about those things. But I'll also say that the board has not taken action. So the first action that has been taken, which you actually have to ratify tonight, is the letter that was sent in which you voiced your displeasure or your questions around the task force. But those other activities and things that have been put in place or any clarity or the board weighing in has actually not occurred. And so we can agree to disagree on that. I think you can have a different opinion and I can have a different opinion, and, you know, that is fine. And hopefully the task force resolves some of those things. I think the second piece of that, though, is with the task force, you know, I think this group, you mentioned having specific OIGs and others and all of that. Not sure if you get any stronger than the former Northern District Attorney or some of the others, the Chief Justice, who actually put this not this organization, but the actual OIG's office in place, as well as those council members. And having testimony and contributions from those others is also valuable. But any recommendation that you make will be taken back. But again, you know, and they have been thus far. You mentioned the training. That's happening now. I think I highlighted that we started with the Carl Vinson Institute, but we're not done. I want to make sure of that. So just because you only see one portion of it doesn't mean we're not finished. And to ensure that people don't have that assumption, that's why I stated on the record that we're starting with this, and this is where we are now. And so we plan to continue on supporting your ask, your comments, and all of those things. But I do believe you have to say some of those things on the record. That's important because the conversations that we've had in private, the public wouldn't know about it until we brought those things in the presentation today, and we're having this discourse and we're highlighting that we had those conversations offline. And so now we're doing so, and if you decide to take action or do certain things, you have that ability to do so. But what I think is also important is, as we all stand with the OIG, when she declares in May that there are some emergency situations that could be prohibiting the work, and we have differences of opinion, we have to resolve those. And so that was May, and now we're almost to October. So we want to make sure that we're being responsive as well. We couldn't wait on the COVID response. We couldn't wait on the water main breaks. We can't wait on the crime. We can't wait on any situation that prohibits productivity in this city. And so that's why I'm here before you this evening. That's why the administration took action to deliver and design a task force. Okay?
Thank you. And
ma'am.
I want to clarify, I did not mean to imply that the people on the task force were not qualified by any stretch of the imagination. It's just subject matter experts within specific specialties, which is also why we have people on the board within specific specialties. So highlighting that someone who is operationally an expert of how an OIG operates is a different type of subject matter expert than who we currently have on the task force. I am not at all implying that they are not qualified and we do not need and want input.
Understood. Received.
Well, thank you for speaking to us. I appreciate your presentation, and I look forward to the continued discussion and collaboration with the main goal. I think that it's clear from the board that experts are consulted with respect to members in the city, employees of the city, department heads, leadership, the mayor's office, council, everyone understanding the role of an inspector general, also the role of the ethics office, and also the role of the board with respect to governing the ethics and inspector general's office. I appreciate the clarification that the areas of concern that were presented in your presentation are actually potential areas of concern that are from the mayor's office. Because I don't want to, I want to be clear that a lot of these areas of, well, I don't want to say all, but the majority of these areas of concern are not from the board. And it's troubling that none of these areas of concern address the areas of concern that have been repeatedly expressed on behalf of the Office of Inspector General. And that is the difficulties, difficulties that the office has faced with respect to conducting their investigations. So that is concerning that those particular areas of concern are not being presented as an area of concern from the mayor's office.
May I
One more
respond
thing
to
I
that
wanted-
piece? Because I
okay.
don't want to lose it. And,
Okay.
and if that's okay, is that okay?
Yes, well, I would like you to respond, but I'll forget my train of thought.
Okay,
So I
and
just
I don't
one
wanna
more
forget
thing, and
mine
it ties
either, yeah.
into it. Another issue that I want to make sure that's on the record, and this is very important, and it goes into the general discussion that we're having, and our primary concern and paramount need for experts in the field of inspector generals to come in and speak to everyone involved. A lot of these concerns, lack of review or authorization for an investigation, lack of notice to those being investigated, some confidentiality issues that my fellow board member just spoke on a little bit. I do not believe that the insinuation of there being some type of approval process or oversight process, for example, to initiate an investigation, are best practices with respect to offices of Inspector General. So again, we're in the learning phase, we're in the exploring phase, we're trying to make sure that we are making sure that there is independent oversight and effective oversight, but we also need to make sure that the Office of Inspector General and the Ethics Office are both tasked with the tools that they need to actually effectively do their job, which protects the public. So I guess what I wanted to say, and I'm very long-winded, and I apologize for that, I do have a concern that the way some of these issues are presented, and it seems like what may be the implied proposal to these issues, are violating the independence of these particular offices, and most importantly and most concerningly, not according to best practices and standards with respect to offices of Inspector General. So that's all I have to say.
May I highlight one
that.
thing, Madam City Attorney? Couple of things. I think one piece that's very important is going back to this point is the structure is quite different than some of those best practices that you mentioned. So if we're not going to use the structure of the best practices, do the best practices apply? That's a question that I don't have the answer to. And that's actually the crux of some of our issues. And so that's one piece. Second piece is the issues from the OIG were made public in a public meeting on May 20th. The administration had not provided, let's call it, our side of the story. And so there would be no other way than do so in a public meeting, which is why in this public meeting and the previous public meeting, you see these items detailed in writing, presented on the record. And so that way you get what was presented on May 20th and you get what's presented on September 19th and whenever we went before the COC. I'll yield to Madam City Attorney.
And the other thing is, it depends on what type of OIG you want. Right now, our legislation has several voids. It doesn't even recite the fact that she reports and is accountable to you. She is supposed to be reviewed by you, but at the last meeting I overheard, she said, I don't report to anybody but the public. Well, she reports to you. We're not trying to change that. We're trying to clarify that. You should be signing off on her leave request. You should be signing off on how she's organizing the personnel. You should be signing off on any type of bullying allegations that are happening. You all are her oversight board. That's not in the legislation. Those types of things got to be fixed. So you writing back, and I think the letter was to me, saying let's get training. No, we're not training until we figure out how we're going to operate this, and we couldn't get consensus of the board of how y'all want to go. And so you can't expect the administration to say, okay, whatever she wants, it's fine. That's not it. We want to make certain that the OIG is working to meet the needs of the city of Atlanta as adopted by its city council for what it was trying to do internally and not deal with an OIG who wants to do investigation that she thinks she can turn over to a criminal organization. So that we have a differences.
Let me. Can I?
I do want to highlight one thing just to close off. I do want to highlight one thing. I'm sorry. I apologize.
Go ahead.
I thought
go
you
ahead.
were.
You go ahead,
no.
Mr. Donald.
Well, listen.
You go ahead.
I think
okay.
y'all had given the floor. I yielded to the city attorney.
Yes, that's a second.
If you would like me to yield
No.
back.
I'm letting you go ahead and speak. Go ahead.
Are you?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I want to make sure that I also highlight, while certain things are not required for action, I think we've taken them anyway. That's what I want to make sure that I highlight, is that some of these things haven't happened in an open meeting or there haven't been formal requests and all of those things. I'm not going to be overly passionate about it. I think it's important, and if you don't agree, you have to adjudicate those issues. And so that's the process that we're in now. And Madam Chair, I yield. I just wanted to make sure that I highlighted that because there are areas in which the city and another area disagrees. We don't get to pick that we're right. The other person doesn't get to pick that they're right. There has to be a process to do that. And I think that's why we began with the board and now we've continued that process. Please, Madam Chair, I yield and apologize if I stepped in.
No problem. And I didn't mean to interrupt because I forgot you did yield. So just to clarify, City Attorney, the board was very clear in our many meetings of all our concerns. You met with everyone that's on this board that was part of that. Well, not you per se, but, the group, right? There was a group. Everyone was on those calls either in person or virtually, and we had listed and stated our concerns, not just with the OIG, concerns with the legislation, concerns that maybe there's the oversight with ethics, things that we've noticed that had changed or, because some of us have been here a little bit longer and said, hey, we were able to do this before, not able to do that. We need a clarification for that. The direction of the board, and I believe as my board member, Ms. Simmons has stated, we made it very clear what we wanted to be next steps for us to address the concerns that we are hearing about from the mayor's office or the executive board. We have said it multiple times, both in person, both virtually, even in email, that for us to even say what is right or wrong of what the Inspector General is currently doing, we should understand what the day-to-day of an Inspector General's office, that was our, before you shake your head, that was our request and our concern, right? So our concern was, what does that look like day-to-day so that we can actually decide, is this the route that we want to go? We have an Inspector General that actually is up the street across the way. We could have invited them in their office to say, it's not about how they report, but the day-to-day functions of investigations, the day-to-day functions of how they report out. That's what we wanted to kind of get a better understanding. We have 20 plus years to understand how the ethics office has worked, right? We've gone through that. We know it. We've gone to, they do a great thing with their conferences. We get the best practices from across the country, and we've been doing it for 22 years. We had said, hey, we've only had this office for 3 years. We don't know what are the best practices or what does the day-to-day operations look like. Regardless of how the hiring or authority structure is, we do not have that lineup. So when we asked that question, we had said, and I made it very clear on my second email to say, I personally don't feel responsible to say this is how legislation should be written, or this is how they should be doing it, or what the policy or procedure should be for that office, without having more understanding of what an Inspector General does day to day. Right now, we have a piece of legislation that was written in 2020. We've tweaked it a little bit in 2023, and now we're back to a task force in 2024 with still no understanding of day to day. Now, I do see bringing up the task force, and that I'm going to yield that back to also my other board member who mentioned that we had asked for subject expert matters. These are great folks, legally minded, great folks, compliance, all that. But I asked, where is the Inspector General or someone who's worked in Inspector General? I don't know if maybe one of the 5 here has worked inside that office and knows the day-to-day. And that's part we don't know. But on surface, it doesn't look like they're actually experts, meaning that they've worked in the IG's office. No, not meaning subject experts. Let me clear that up. Subject experts meaning what we had asked for. We had asked for someone who's worked inside of IG's office. And like I said, surface, it doesn't look like that. Now, they might have worked in them, and you can let us know if they have. But on surface, it does not look like they have. And so when we got the task force, we got their names, even if you Google their LinkedIn pages, surface-wise, it doesn't seem like they have worked in a IG's office, regardless if it was state or city aspects. And that was kind of our big ask. That was not.
Would you like me to respond?
Yes.
Okay. So I think, one, what we'll highlight is what you've asked for. The task force meeting has not been provided yet. It hadn't been made public. Haven't seen an agenda. I think you're making an assumption. I think the first thing that I would say is when you look at this list, I don't know if we would be able to say that the former district attorney for the Northern District doesn't have insight on how an IG office works. Maybe we do need to have some education on that so that we can share it with everyone. I think that's important, or the understanding of how the OIG offices work. I think when I look at this board, exceptional and a lot of dynamic people. But you've only hired one IG. And so judging how the OIG or WEC group should be on the task force and things of that nature, doing what we're doing, providing recommendations. Those recommendations, if you go back and look at the things that we've done, your recommendations have been in there without you taking a public action or anything that sends us that direction to either us or the council. We're still responsive, and we're going to be, because you've asked us to be. You asked us to make sure that we train our staff and that we make sure that folks understand how to operate in an ethical government. You've also asked that we include subject matter expertise directly from the OIG. We intend to do that. The first thing we did is respond with training. Low-hanging fruit, that's the first piece. More to come. Doesn't stop now. We don't leave work tomorrow and never come back. We plan to be here, and we plan to continue to deliver. So we're lockstep in that. I refuse to be adversarial because we're partners with you. I wore my button and I mean it. So we're going to stand with you. And so the second piece of that, though, is in highlighting this group, is the start. And they have just as much, if not expertise, as this body. You've got folks who've operated. You've got from the governor's office, which oversees the OIG. You think we're not going to leverage that to make sure we include that group to come in? Absolutely. So, again, we'll make that ask. And since we haven't gotten to the point that it becomes public, because you got to have a public meeting. You've got to publish an agenda. You've got to notice it. And you'll see those things as those meetings unfold. And so they are forthcoming. So I want to make sure that we assure you of that and that those things are coming. So to kind of, I don't know, it is shocking for me to look at this group and hear some of that feedback, because I'd even highlight one last thing. I heard somebody mention, we want to make sure the people are represented. I think that's part of the thought from having Ms. Tanya Miller, who represents the Georgia Federation of Employees, because our union workers, we've got a strong union environment, and that comes into play as well. So we're lockstep, and we hear you very closely and intently, but now Rome wasn't built in a day. In 1873, New York started, and they just had new legislation in 2023. And so we'll continue on that path with you. And as long as I'm here, and I know with this mayor, we're standing lockstep. I'll give you one last example. In this meeting on May 20th, where Madam OIG came before in public comment. That was just public comment. So it's on the record for public comment, but it's not a committee meeting or anything like that. It was highlighted that investigations are being impeded and there are challenges and all of that good stuff. On August 28th, we met and we asked to provide those instances. And Madam City Attorney, who is a part of the state bar, responsible for calling balls and strikes from the city, will ensure that any of those impediments are removed, because we're that serious about it. Now, I know we're waiting on that information as of now, but when it comes, we'll make sure to be responsive. And I won't speak on behalf of the city attorney, but we stand ready to be responsive. And as a part of the city, because she reports to the council and the mayor, I am certain, especially from the mayor's side and with our dynamic council, we're going to respond and we're going to remove impediments. But we do have to know what they are, and those things have to be specific. And that's why I highlighted ours specifically, so that there's no question. You know what those issues from our perspective are, and we have to do that all around. That's all. Just want to make sure of that.
And I just want to once again clarify, I said on surface, not saying what we were looking for, what we asked for on surface, meaning even what you just presented. That was what I wanted to clarify. I'm not discrediting their expertise in the law firm, their intelligence level or any of that, or their expertise in their fields. That's not what I was implying. I was just saying what we asked and what you look on surface were two different things. And like I said, I can yield if the attorneys want to talk about any of their attorneys, if they would know what the IG speaks about. If not, you don't have to. But that was my look at it when I looked at their titles based on what we asked for. So that was kind of where
I mean, it sounds like you all are open to. We have a certified inspector general. Our inspector general is certified. I believe it's by the National Association of Inspector Generals. And so I think we have an excellent task force. I think the task force is an absolutely excellent idea. And I appreciate that coming from the mayor's office. That shows the mayor's office, y'all's commitment to integrity and transparency and all of that. But I think what we are trying to say is that I'm an attorney, but I'm not a certified inspector general. Right? And I may have worked with certified inspector generals in my capacity as an attorney, but I don't have that certification. So it's our ask that the education, that all members of the city and the public, whoever is involved in this process, there is some serious input from experts that are actually certified with respect to the day-to-day, how investigations are open, how they remain independent, how legislation can potentially impact that independence. How do we maintain confidentiality while protecting the interests of the city? What about conflicts of interest? I've heard a lot of conflicts of interest with respect to personal attorneys, city attorneys, employees, best interest of the city. I answer to the council, I answer to the mayor. So that's all we're asking. And again, I appreciate this task force. I think all of us unanimously agree that we appreciate this task force. And we just want some certified experts to tell us all and help us all with this overall goal of transparency and ethical city government.
Got 3 quick points on that. I think the first one is heard, documented, and we'll make sure that we make those recommendations as a part of the process. Second piece is, while you are an attorney and work with city attorneys and all of that good stuff, you're providing oversight to an OIG as well. And you don't have to be an OIG to do that, because you have been set and appointed by various groups based on your expertise. And so we want to make sure that all aspects are included in the process. And I think the third and most important point, listen, our OIG is Shannon Manigault, and she's our OIG, and we stand with her. Our mayor is Mayor Dickens. Our council president is Doug Shipman. And I won't name all of the members of the council, but they all play a role and they're all important pieces. And I did not mention Ms. Jabu Sengova, who's our ethics officer. Everyone is important and everyone plays a role. And this proposal doesn't eliminate anyone. The goal is to make sure that we clean this process up. I said in the beginning, I know going into this, everything that we think is right, it's not all going to be considered right in the end. Someone's going to say, yeah, well, that's not how it goes. Someone's going to say, actually, this is how it goes. There are some things that we'll be correct on. There's some things we won't. But right now, who do we adjudicate those issues to? Who resolves those issues? Usually you go to the legislation. Currently, the legislation doesn't speak on those things. And so that is the purpose of this. And so just making sure that we all are on the same page as well as in a specific area. Continuous quality improvement, making sure that we run this government better and better every day so that our citizens receive that benefit. And while we may not agree on some of the gray areas in the middle, we definitely agree that the OIG is necessary. The office has to be empowered, and the board has to be able to provide oversight and be empowered and have the tools to do so. And subject matter experts are equipped to deliver that for us. And so we agree on that. I believe that from your statements tonight, you also agree on that. And so we're looking forward to next steps.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, I just want to make certain that we go on record that when we talked to the OIG, she said that there weren't 90 pending investigations now, so the state of emergency may have gone down a little bit, but whatever she thinks she's been impeded by, let me know, and we will get that information to her. That I protect confidentiality in the law department. So whatever it is she needs, but what we don't want to have happen while we're waiting for the fine tuning of this is to have blanket access to everybody's personnel records, blanket access to emails throughout the city. Those things we are not ready to do until we get some clarification that that's required to do. But we are willing to provide any and all information that she designates to me that she needs.
I appreciate that, and I think that was one of those recommendations of changing policy to at least add law department. We had that conversation too. So, some of the policies, because some of our policies are old and did not include inspector generals when they were written. So, thank you, Mr. Donald, for your presentation and listening and talking to the board tonight. I appreciate it. Thank you, and we will see where the task force. Thank you so much. I guess that was the question. Okay. Well, thank you, everyone, especially with the delay in technology that you're still around. So next on the agenda, we are nowhere near the middle of this agenda today. We are still in the board operations. So we do need to make an amendment. Well, actually, there's no need amendment. I will need to make a motion per the city attorney's recommendation for the 2 letters. You and Sorry, we had one board member step out, but we actually still have quorum, so we don't have to wait for them. So there's a motion. There were 2 letters written. One I was going to put into public. So I do need a motion for those. Yes, please.
I motion for the statement of concern that was addressed to Mayor Dickens and the task force members to be put into record for a vote.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and second. Is there any more discussion on that letter of concern?
There is. I want to be clear on record that I do abstain.
Well, when you get to the vote, you can abstain.
I understand. But
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. When we vote, you can abstain via the vote. I do yay, nay, and abstention. Yes. Okay. All right. Any other further discussions on those letters? The letter of concern. Okay. Hearing none. All those in favor say aye or aye.
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 Those. Okay. Oh, Andrew came back just in time for a vote. The motion, Andrew, is the motion of letter of concern that was sent to the mayors and task force. We are on voting on that. So I'm going to put the vote up again since you just walked in. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. You're nay or abstain?
Nay.
Okay.
Abstained.
Nay or abstain?
Abstained.
Okay.
Abstained is-
2 different votes.
Abstained is
Okay.
stated in the comments. In the comments we just.
Okay. Yes. There's 2. Okay. Any all those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Now.
I abstain.
We have 1 abstention. The motion has passed. The letter of concern to the mayor's office has been approved by the board. There's another motion that needs to be put on.
I motion that we vote on the letter of support for the Office of Inspector General and Ethics Office.
Okay. 3.
I second.
It has been moved in second. Any discussion on that? No discussion on the letter of support of the Office of Inspector General. All those in favor say aye.
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 All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions?
I abstain.
Okay. The motion passed. So the letter of support that was written for our nominating entities has been approved. I'm also on the board, on the board operations. I'm actually going to read the letter of support into public comments so those can see that. I just had it up. Hold on. What did I do with it? No, you got a hard copy? Because I had it on my phone. Thank you for. Appreciate it. Yep, thank you. Okay. So this letter, as we stated before, we are nominated by city entities that puts us on the board. We did an official letter to statement of support. Starting this out, 7 years ago, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Georgia announced indictments of high-level city of Atlanta city employees, contractors who ultimately pled to or were found guilty of crimes against the city. In the aftermath of this scandal, after thorough vetting and exhaustive recommendations by a specially convened task force, the city established the Office of Inspector General. This independent entity works to promote accountability, integrity, and restores public trust by identifying fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption within the city of Atlanta's municipal government. The governing board of the Office of Inspector General and the Ethics Office, known as the governing board, as established within the city charter, which is known as the charter, serves to ensure the independence of the Office of Inspector General. The Office of Inspector General reports directly to the governing board. The members of the governing board live, work, and/or have business interests in Atlanta. Each member represents one of 9 nominating organizations that share a vested interest in the success of the City of Atlanta: Association of Certified Fraud Examiners, Georgia Chapter, Atlanta Bar Association, Atlanta Business League, Atlanta Planning Advisory Board, Gates City Bar Association, Georgia Society of Certified Public Accountants, League of Women Voters of Atlanta Fulton County, Metro Atlanta Chamber of Commerce, and 7 major universities. The governing board's responsibility to Atlanta and its citizens is to ensure that the Office of Inspector General's independence, which involves carrying out its duties effectively and efficiently. Recently, the Office of Inspector General has come under fire for seeking resources necessary to investigate fraud, waste, abuse, and/or corruption in city government. Publicly commenting on instances, I'm getting tongue-tied. On instances it determined to be targeted efforts to delay, obstruct, and interfere with its objective investigations, and ultimately being effective in investigating, identifying, and reporting findings of city government fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption. The governing board met with both city leadership and the Office of Inspector General to explore ways to improve existing legislation and collaboration between the Office of Inspector General and city departments and leaderships, with paramount priority of ensuring the Office of Inspector General remains independent and able to fulfill its duties per the charter. Notwithstanding these efforts, the Office of Inspector General continues to encounter efforts are actively impeding its work. Given the ongoing challenges faced by the Office of Inspector General, the governing board expresses its unified support for the Office of Inspector General and disapproves of attempts to prevent the Office of Inspector General from independently fulfilling its mission in service of public. Without the Office of Inspector General, the conduct that promoted headlines 7 years ago will remain unchecked. Importantly, the mission of the Office of Inspector General is not only to identify fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption, it is to educate and prevent further attacks of fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption through education campaigns and through objective reporting and recommendations. Further, when the Office of Inspector General is independent and effective, it increases the public's trust that appropriate stewardship and oversight is being applied to the city's resources. We continue to advocate for an attempt to engage in constructive dialogue with the city leaderships and the Office of Inspector General to discuss the serious issues threatening the Office of Inspector General's independence and in turn threaten the governing board's oversight responsibilities. Particularly, we have urged the Executive Cabinet to engage in learning sessions with experts, such as the President of the Association of Inspector General, the Georgia Inspector General's Office, or other established Inspector General professionals, about the roles and of nature of the Inspector General to no avail. We will not withstand by and allow the very office created to stem misconduct to be handcuffed and stripped of its independence. We are unwavering in our commitment to ensure an independent, effective, and efficient Office of Inspector General. Our dedication is to ensure it's resolute, and we will continue our efforts to uphold the office's independence. We believe in Atlanta. We know that the Office of Inspector General's independence will continue to restore and raise up Atlanta. Of the over 89,000 municipalities in the U.S., there are only 194 state and local inspector generals. It is a testament of the City of Atlanta's continued trend-setting, forward-thinking, that it took this step to address prior city officials' past mismanagement and misdeeds. To continue to be a national and global leader in how to be a world-class city that supports business and its citizens, we encourage city leadership and its residents and business leaders to stand with us in supporting an independent Office of Inspector General. Sincerely, the undersigned, myself, Nicola Hines, Chair, Rebecca Brubaker, Andrew Cohen, Natalie Lewis, Lisa Lang, Terry Simmons, Richard Taylor, Cecily Welch, and Todd Gray abstained to the letter. Thank you. That's the end of the letter. Okay, board operations is completed. We will now move on to the ethics office on the agenda.
Good evening, board members, members of the public. Carlos Santiago, Deputy Ethics Officer. I'm stepping in for Jabu. She had an unfortunate emergency and had to pop out, so I'm going to be handling duties on behalf of the Ethics Office this evening. So we're going to report on our areas within the office, starting first with an update on our training and public education and outreach efforts. We'll then have Mr. Robinson come up and discuss our ethics programming and the latest updates there. I'll present our enforcement investigations update, and then we'll wrap with a review of our work plan highlights and budget. So I'm going to go ahead and invite up to the stage Ibiana Bonjo, who's serving as our ethics advisor, and Kevin Shuckle, who is the newest member of our team, who is also serving in the ethics advisor capacity as of last month. So we're excited to have him on board.
Good evening, Madam Chair, Board, members of the public. I'm Ibiana Bonjo. I'm an ethics advisor in the ethics office. So I'm just going to give you a brief overview about our training activities, and then I'll take any questions if you have any, and then Mr. Kevin Shuckle will report on our public outreach and education activities. So currently, we launched our annual ethics training on August 15th, and that's the mandatory annual training that all city employees and officials have to take every year. So we also launched the training for our ELA employees, which are employees with a limited access to technology, on August 16th. So to date, we have 4,389 employees who have completed their training out of 8,885 employees. So that is tracking us at 49.4%, which is on par and trending according to where we were at last year with the training, which was at 48.6%. So I do just want to note that the completion rate does not include the employees who we conducted ELA training for, and we did that training in person for those particular employees. So like I said, the completed number is only for the employees who have taken the ethics training via the Oracle system. We've also conducted training, like I said, for our ELA employees, the employees with limited access to technology. And with those employees, we are working with the Department of Parks and Recreation, the Department of Public Works, ATL, Department of Transportation, and the Department of Watershed Management. So those are the main city departments that have a large number of employees who do not have ready access to maybe phones or computers, so that way they can fulfill their annual requirements. So 3 years ago, we started this part of our training program to go out to meet them at their locations, at these different city installation sites, in order to not only provide training for the employees, but to engage them and interact with them one-on-one as the ethics office as well too. Being the fact there's sort of a disconnect between being here at City Hall and those remote locations, it was important for us to be able to connect with those employees, provide them training, answer any questions that they have, and most importantly, let them know that we are an available resource to them and that it matters to us as far as ensuring that they have proper training and that they're able to get all the advice and the guidance that they need as far as to ensure that they are doing their jobs ethically. I also want to give a quick shout out to the HR individuals and employees who have helped us to facilitate these trainings. It's a huge concerted effort to work with the human resource business partners, coordinate the trainings, schedule the trainings, and then go out to do the trainings. So we appreciate them because they ensure that the employees are there, they're there on time, and they're attentive and they're engaging to the training. And we can readily see the impact of the training when we do the one-on-one trainings because the employees are able to ask us questions, directly after the training pertaining to the things that they may have learned there, or a lot of times the training will trigger things that they want to ask based upon their experiences in the field and the things that they have encountered. So it's going really, really good. We'll be training until the end of October. However, we will have the training available for us to go out to meet those employees depending on what the departmental needs are in case it ends up extending past October. So that is it for the annual ethics training course itself. Some of the other training initiatives that we are embarking on, we also still present at the new employee orientation that occurs once a month that HR puts on for the new employees. So once that was reinstated for this year, we have also been attending that and presenting ethics at that orientation. We've also conducted training for 2 city boards at the request of those boards, and we continue to create supplemental trainings depending on departmental requests, and also that cater to and target in on maybe some of the issues or activities that may be prevalent that we're seeing in certain departments. For example, like outside employment, gifts and gratuities. So we're working on those targeted trainings that more so focus in on those particular points of the ethics code that maybe need to be addressed in certain departments. So that is all the information that I have as far as training is concerned. And I wanted to know, did anybody have any questions before we move forward? Nope. Okay, thank you. So Mr. Kevin Shuckle is going to come up and present the last portion and discuss our education and outreach efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, everyone. So once again, my name's Kevin Shuckle. I'm the newest ethics advisor with the Ethics Office. Very pleased to be able to speak with you tonight and for many more nights to come, I hope. So currently for our education and outreach activities, we're in the process of planning an Ethics Day event. The goal of this event is to not only engender trust in our office and exposure with employees of the city, but also get more people in installations involved with our office and make them aware of our presence and our availability to address any concerns they might have. Currently, this event is scheduled for October 29th, and Professor Cohen has generously agreed to help us out with that. So we thank you very much for agreeing to embark with us on that. The theme of the event, we're really trying to focus it around engendering engagement, as I said, with employees both in City Hall and without, both through an in-person event and a virtual component that will be accessible to those installation employees. Also, something that we've learned from our ELA trainings on site, there seems to be a disconnect from employees who are more out in the field as opposed to those in City Hall, and how they're perceived by the public and how they feel treated. So we really want to engender them with a sense of pride in their work and help them understand that their job is extremely important and that they are, in fact, appreciated, and their engagement with us is also appreciated to keep the city in compliance. Additionally, we are embarking on a new branding and marketing campaign for the office, including an updated seal and office identity, both with content creation that is virtual and real, including posters that we can place in those installation locations to keep ethics on installation employees' minds. We have also, since I have come into the office, been updating our social media presence in order to increase our exposure. So far, I have mainly been focused on the LinkedIn aspect of that to reach a lot of our more professional employees, especially here at City Hall. And I'm pleased to report that even with the work that we have already done, we've seen a 200 to 300% increase in engagement across that platform, as well as on our Twitter profile, or X, excuse me. So we're really looking forward to how that exposure creates more activity for us, either by getting more complaints or just with more people interacting with our office in a positive manner. We're also trying to increase our exposure to other departments and engender more interagency communication, including with the mayor's executive offices, HR, and any other departments that might be engaged in social media campaigns across the city, again, to put us kind of at the forefront and be the pillar that's part of the mayor's administration. We are also looking at incorporating new accounts on that front, including an Instagram account, a YouTube account for historical purposes, and a Facebook page just to reach the largest audience possible. Lastly, with the increase in social media activity, we are in the final stages of putting together a coherent social media engagement and use policy for the office, just to ensure we're all above board and that we have a coherent policy in place and there's no questions either by the public or by internal employees as to what is appropriate use of that material. Is there any questions or concerns? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you, and welcome to the team.
Madam Chair and board members, Ray Robinson, Ethics Program Manager. We'll use some highlights of where we are, and I'll piggyback with Kevin left you off with the media and our communications outreach. Part of that is going to roll up to our website. The website is not only a presence of the ethics office, but it's also a media campaign, who we are, our messaging, our vision, our mission statement. So all it's going to be tied into what a presence will be, and that's going to be tied back to all our media campaigns, all back to our media campaigns. So it's going to be hopefully not a one-stop shop, but at least 90% one-stop shop. We have everything rolling to each other. So wherever we put out on LinkedIn or X will be showing up on our website is a scroll bar. So you'll be continuing information being shared across the board. We're looking at 3 possible vendors to support us with that. We're probably looking at a presentation to our senior management so we can do a vendor selection. So that's rolling up. We're looking at maybe 4 to 5 months to get that done. That's depending on our projects and the workload going forward. But that's a goal we're going to reach probably February, March timeframe, 2025. Our succession program, mainly getting our office and moving forward because when we leave, we want to leave something there. We're doing our policy procedures, documenting all those processes. So everything's there for new people coming in. So that's something to learn and use. So that's an ongoing effort because as things change, our policies change. As we build out new programs and efforts, we're going to have to update those on a continuous basis. Our financial audit, we talked about automating our audit program for a while now, going from 300 that we're doing manually to auditing over 2,000. We're in the final stages of that project. We should be able to launch in the next couple of months, and our ability to audit every single financial statement will be there for us, as opposed to looking at 10% of the population. And we've run some tests right now, and we see some interesting results of that. Our case management system, mainly impacting investigations point. Right now is a manual process. We have some automation, but that automation started more of the intake process from NAVEX, but we don't have a automation process inside the office itself. That will help the investigations office to streamline the operations maybe to 80% of the manual work getting rid of and streamline the communication across all of them. So that's going to help a great deal. They're going to engage in more investigations, timely closeout on investigations. So there's a whole gamut of information that's there. Reporting is going to be a lot easier because the system's going to be built to give a reporting, at least draft reporting, so they don't have to do the manual reporting anymore. That's the goal. Our data management program. It's tied to our restake effort. Right now, we're going forward with a renovation of part of the ethics office. Last year, the extension side was done. Now we're doing the main piece of the office. Before we did that, we had to make sure we get all the cabinets out of the way, all the documents, 20 years of stuff that's sitting around there. So we're getting rid of all that stuff, and we got that all done. Lucky, I think the last 2 weeks ago, we finished that. Papers were shredded, thrown away, and we archived stuff we're going to keep, and we're going to scan that into our OneDrive. But part of that whole OneDrive is managing that also. It has 20 years of stuff in there, too, so we need to manage that, and we're using the record retention policy to make sure we keep what we need to keep legally and make sure we manage it directly. So that's going to happen. Hopefully our restack effort is going to start in the next couple of months, work with Dean. That's going to be somewhat disruption because half the office is going to be taken away, but we'll manage that and how we go forward. But that's the highlights of the programs and projects we're working on. Any questions? Thank you.
All right, so again, Carlos Santiago, Deputy Ethics Officer. Wanted to provide the update on our enforcement and investigation progress over the last 2 months since our last board meeting in July. Both the August and the September enforcement reports were sent to you electronically, and we've also provided hard copies to you this evening. The reporting time frame for this report tonight is going to be July 12th through September 12th. As far as intake goes, over the past 2 months, we've received a total of 27 complaints and integrity line reports. Of those, 1 was received by external email, 1 by internal referral, 1 through walk into the ethics office, and then 23 of the incoming complaints that we received were through the integrity line. From those 27 complaints received, we've opened 2 new ethics investigations. We currently sit at 22 total open investigations. Of those 22 open matters, 12 of those are currently in the fact-finding phase, and the other 10 we are in the report drafting and the process of closing those matters. During the same time period, we did close 1 investigation, and if you look at the August report, there should be an attachment in there with our findings in that report for your review. We have sanction payments that are still incoming in 3 of our prior cases. So we've been working with the Office of Revenue within the Department of Finance to ensure that the collection of sanction payments is occurring and people are being held to account if they did have a sanction in one of their cases. We've also referred 5 matters which fell out of our jurisdiction to the appropriate offices and agencies. And just to kind of give a year total summary of where we're sitting right now, as of the year to date, we've received 120 total complaints. Of those, we've opened 16 ethics investigations. We've closed 7 matters, and we've referred 30 of those complaints to the appropriate department or agency. And then just in a comparison to last year, we were at this same time, we had opened 14 new matters and closed 6 matters. So I will say that we're a little bit ahead. I think we're actually a lot ahead as far as the closure of cases. I think I can anticipate that we're going to have quite a few matters close over the next 2 months. So the next reporting, enforcement reporting should be a little bit more voluminous when it comes to closed out reports and decisions that we anticipate coming forward. To close on this report, I just want to again thank our investigations team for their hard work. And again, I want to thank the board for your continuous feedback and everything you provide us to continue to improve on our processes. Are there any questions on the enforcement investigations report?
Any questions? No? Thank you so much, Mr. Santiago.
Sure. And I'll just kind of roll into the our report on work plan. Obviously, take a look at that. There was a lot of activity over the last 2 months, especially on the area of professional development and training. Our staff members, I think basically the entire staff has been participating in leadership training, professional development. We're really trying to work and make sure that we have the most professional environment and continue to work and making sure that we have the requisite leadership within the office, and also making sure that as an office we are really keying in on what our core mission and core values are as an office, so to make sure that we're living up to what's expected of us. Ray touched on the restack process. We're really excited that we're getting closer to that part of things. It has been a really tough effort, and I really want to thank the entire staff for how hard they worked to organize the ethics office. Again, dealing with over 20 years of paperwork and all sorts of items around the office, we were able to really clear things out. And that's only by doing that are we allowed to actually implement the restack and allow Dean to do the work that they need to do to make the office what it will soon be, which is going to be a much more comfortable working space given the size of the office now versus where it was when we first moved in. Right. Does anybody have any questions on the work plan report? There was quite a bit in there, but and I'm willing to answer any questions you may have. Okay.
No.
All right. Turning to the budget report. Currently, we're spending as budgeted between all 3 funds. We did do some budget adjustments in 2 of the enterprise funds to align office expenses throughout all 3 funds. During the last meeting, Vice Chair Gray, I know you requested that we submit a listing of all the contractors that we are currently utilizing, and that we've included that in your packet. So that way there's, you guys have a list of who we're working with, and if you have any questions about that, we're more than willing to answer those. And that's really it. Again, we continue to spend as anticipated. Do you have any questions about the budget or anything else that, while I'm up here?
I don't hear any. No, thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I believe next on the agenda, Office Inspector General.
Good evening. So we're going to have the regular portion of our meeting, and we're going to approach it in the regular fashion. So first, we're going to have Deputy Inspector General Brad Garvey come up to give a report about the Independent Procurement Review Division. We're then going to have Deputy Inspector General Shelby Williams come up and give a report about the work of the Compliance Division. We're then going to have Director of Information and Outreach, Felicia Henderson, report on recent trainings and other developments. If it's okay, then we'll also then transition to the budget report and have Business Manager Rosalind Anderson give that before then concluding with some remarks of my own. So if that's all right, we will begin with Deputy Inspector General Garvey. Thanks.
All right. Good evening, board members. Brad Garvey, Deputy Inspector General with the Independent Procurement Review Division. We've been a busy group the past couple of months. Can you hear me? Okay. Okay.
So either you move the mic to you or you move to the mic.
Okay, we can work with that. All right. So we've been a busy group past couple of months. We've initiated 19 solicitation reviews. We have issued 15 reports. While doing the 15 reports, we reviewed 38 submissions. Again, the submissions are what vendors provide to the city to try to win an award for a city contract. We issued 78 observations, which is the same thing as what had previously been findings, just noted areas of risk or perceived deficiencies in the procurement process. And the aggregate estimated dollar value is just under $250 million for what we reviewed. The majority of the reports were for the aviation department. That was for about $195 million. And then we to speak about the observations, we've had some of them where the Department of Procurement transitioned from doing a 1 to 10 scoring system to a 1 through 9 Lean Six Sigma scoring system to try to assist with differentiating the scores among vendors so that decisions could be arrived at more easily. One thing we've noticed, there seems to be a little disconnect between the standard operating procedures conflicting with what's provided in the solicitation packages, sometimes issued the same day. This seems to be just kind of ongoing, so maybe it's just growing pains, but we have reviewed some records where individuals in DOP are seeking guidance about which standard to apply when they're going through the procurement process. A couple of other observations have been exceptions being granted to financial disclosures, which risk reviews, but DOP also looks at the response review to know what's been submitted or what's not. Recently, council members expressed some concern about exceptions being granted by the risk department or by DOP. Sometimes it seems to be granted, sometimes it doesn't. So I think they were looking for some clarity on the consistency there, to either increase consistency and equity or increase competition. Then another recent one, there was legislation for $33 million for a transportation project. The initial estimate on that was $11 million. We submitted this observation. DOP responded that the user agency had changed the estimate to $16 million, but that inflation and other cost had increased it to $33 million. Is the iPro report has been attached to legislation, but is currently being held in council. It's been held for 2 or 3 cycles now. Council members are expressing want to see where the funding is going to come from. They're also concerned that there's a limited pool to be able to cover all the different council districts. And another observation we had is there was a special procurement where the chief procurement officer designated basically approved the special procurement before the date of the request for the procurement to occur. So in response, DOP just updated the designation memorandum. And lastly, there was another report where DOP sought additional submissions from proponents 40 days after the solicitation closed, and again 80 days after the solicitation closed to have one proponent be able to be responsive for the award. And again, I would like to express my gratitude to the iPro team that supports all of us because it has been very fast-paced. So any questions about that part? Okay. So now I'll get into, I guess, responding to a couple of points that Mr. Donald brought up with the procurement volume, the 14,000 procurement transactions being processed since January 2021. And then the findings account for 0.3% of all those transactions, which comes out to 42. Just for where and I look at this just because it focused on procurement, and that's exactly what we do. So to clarify, the Independent Procurement Review Division looks at the solicitation process, attaches the report to legislation for the council to authorize the award of contracts to vendors. At that point, maybe the only transaction you could consider would be approval by the council. All transactions happen after the iPro review is done. So since the beginning of 2022, iPro has issued 146 reports, 47 reports last year, or 47 reports this year so far, 52 reports last year, and 47 reports in 2022. The estimated dollar value for what we've reviewed is about a little bit over $3.7 billion. Reviewed about over 530 submissions during that period of time. And again, this is starting in January 22, which is a year after the 14,000 procurement transactions mentioned. And the observations we issued numbered 488. So when we have observations or findings in the independent procurement review reports, we submit a draft report to the Department of Procurement with the notes and note where we are seeking a response or where one might be outside their control. So if a solicitation receives 1 or 2 bids, which is under what industry standards consider competition, that's not necessarily within their control. So we just say, yeah, it's not required in this case. Sometimes they respond with outreach efforts, and we allow that because that's part of our QC process. We also offer up the opportunity for us to redact anything from the report that they deem necessary. And the Chief Procurement Officer has indicated to the City Council that he has reviewed the findings of all the iPro reports. So those have been kind of vetted before they actually go out to the City Council. Any questions on that? Okay. All right. Well, that concludes my report. And
Question on something else.
Yes.
Mr. Donald said something about his social security number. Can you say more about that?
about
His social security number?
which,
I don't know. Mr. Donald just said that his social security number was on something, and I just wanted to get more information. I don't know what he was talking about.
Okay, yes. When we responded to an open records request a couple of years ago for an employee benefits solicitation, and there was some information that was not redacted from the work paper on that, we have established processes to not even have that information get in the work product generated by iPros. Thank you.
Good evening. Madam Chair, members of the board, Shelby J. Williams, Deputy Inspector General of the Compliance Division for the Office of the Inspector General. I'm honored to present to you our activity for this evening since the last board meeting in July. In terms of complaints, we've received 74 complaints. 43 of those complaints came through our Inspector General email box. 25 of those complaints resulted in external referrals to the IRS, Secret Service, U.S. Postal Inspector, IG's office, Department of Human Services, IG, Gwinnett County, the Atlanta Housing Authority, City of Atlanta Human Resources, and the Atlanta Police Department, Office of Professional Standards, and the Law Department, just to name a few. A few examples of some issues raised in those external referrals include a violation of due process and conflict of interest, the illegal purchase of land at a deep discount by a Southeast Georgia mayor, outdated information found on a city department's website, a mailbox lock that was changed without consent, retaliation for requesting ADA accommodations, and the theft of $500 million in cryptocurrency. As it relates to active matters, we have a total of 112 active matters. That is an increase of 22 new investigations initiated since the last board meeting. A significant number of these cases are under review for closing. And so this includes a handful of some of the older cases, as you all have seen some of the ones that we closed during this marking period. And so we're working very, very diligently to close those matters, and we hope that we will have them moved to completion by the next board meeting. Regarding closed cases, we closed 6 cases since the last board meeting. The board has received copies of these reports, so I will briefly provide an overview of those 6 closings. In the first case, OIG received a complaint alleging that the Atlanta Information Management lacked oversight of Oracle, which is the city's cloud-based application for finance, human resources, and procurement. The allegation was unsubstantiated. OIG found that the Oracle database was initially engaged by the city as a financial system and was later expanded to include cross-departmental functions. While OIG found evidence to support the allegation that AIM lacked oversight over Oracle, considerable changes were made in 2022, resulting in the formation of the Oracle Governance and Steering Committee, which includes representatives from the mayor's office, finance, human resources, procurement, and AIM. In the second case, OIG received a complaint alleging that a desktop support technician installed unauthorized software on city computers. This allegation was substantiated. OIG found that the software was not authorized for use, and AIM management stated that the employee did not obtain the necessary permissions in order to use the software. The employee received a 1-week unpaid suspension for violating city policy. OIG also found that AIM discovered other unapproved software that was being used at that time, but found no evidence that AIM took steps to identify and/or discipline any other employee responsible for downloading unapproved software. OIG referred this matter to AIM early in its investigation due to the potential security risk to the city's technology environment. In the third case, OIG received a complaint alleging that during the blackout period of an aviation department solicitation, a senior project manager from a Department of Aviation vendor company solicited an internship opportunity for a coworker's daughter from the proponent. This allegation was substantiated. OIG found that the coworker's daughter did not receive an internship. However, a request for the internship was made during the blackout period. OIG found that there was no violation of the blackout period because the communications were not expressly related to the solicitation. OIG notes, as it's stated in the IPRO report that initiated this investigation, that this conduct creates an appearance of impropriety. And OIG found that it might also violate other provisions of the code. OIG made 2 policy and procedure recommendations to mitigate potential risks associated with vulnerabilities identified during the investigation. OIG referred this matter to the Department of Procurement and the Law Department. In the next case, OIG initiated an investigation into activities between a council member and a vendor after receiving a complaint with multiple allegations, including questions about lobbyist identification on city property and city rules regarding lobbyists. OIG found no misconduct by the council member. OIG did find that the vendor has personal and financial relationships with several city officials and employees that were not disclosed as required by the code. OIG also found that a city employee was listed as a reference for the vendor on a solicitation for which the vendor was competing with the city. OIG found that in addition to serving as a reference, this city employee engaged in outside employment in connection with the employee's work and billed the city for the services. Records indicate that the employee submitted false documentation to the city to circumvent city procurement rules. OIG made 12 policy and procedure recommendations to mitigate potential risks associated with vulnerabilities identified during the investigation. OIG referred this matter to City Council, the Department of Parks and Recreation, Public Works, Human Resources, the Office of Constituent Services, and Ethics. OIG also made a criminal referral to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. In the next case, OIG initiated an investigation into activity of an employee in the Department of City Planning. When the department notified OIG that a customer alleged the employee solicited a payment from the customer to have the customer's permit applications expedited. The allegation was substantiated. In addition to the employee identified in the complaint, OIG found additional DCP employees engaged in the same activity. OIG made 5 policy and procedure recommendations to mitigate potential risks associated with the vulnerabilities identified during the investigation. OIG referred this matter to the Department of City Planning and to Ethics. OIG also made a criminal referral to the Fulton County District Attorney's Office. In the final case, OIG initiated an investigation into the activity of the city clerk's office when it received 13 complaints alleging the clerk violated a city resolution. The allegation was partially substantiated. The resolution required the clerk to redact personally identifiable information, in this case, unlisted telephone numbers and cell phone numbers, in accordance with the Georgia Open Records Act before publishing the public record. OIG found that the clerk's office did not redact this information from the public record prior to the public record being published on its website. OIG made a policy and procedure recommendation to mitigate potential risks associated with vulnerabilities identified during the investigation. OIG referred the matter to the clerk's office. During this reporting period, the OIG made 6 administrative referrals from the closed matters just mentioned in this report. And with those 6 administrative referrals, there were 21 policy and procedure recommendations associated with those closed cases. I want to thank the compliance staff for all of their hard work and their commitment to doing this work. And if I may take a moment to clarify something that has been presented tonight by the mayor's office as it relates to the over 1,000 investigations conducted by OIG and ethics with only 47 findings. Just so everyone is on the same page, OIG Compliance Division investigations do not result in findings. Our investigative dispositions are either substantiated, partially substantiated, or unsubstantiated. Additionally, I don't know where the source of the numbers presented by the mayor's office came from, but we are transparent with our numbers, and they can be found in our 2023 annual report. As a friendly reminder, last year, the Compliance Division closed 20 investigations. 9 were substantiated, 3 were partially substantiated, and 7 were unsubstantiated, noting that in one case, we partially substantiated one allegation and unsubstantiated another. And so typically, the majority of cases that we investigate are unsubstantiated, and those are cases that you don't hear about. We have no stake in the outcome of any investigation. Substantiated, unsubstantiated, the facts are the facts. This has been my experience in the 2 decades that I've been doing this work. It is an honor and privilege for me to do what I do. And I've been a proud public servant for 30 years. Contrary to how this office and its work has been displayed and portrayed this evening, this office exists to follow the facts, not find fault. This concludes my report this evening, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have for me.
Thank you. Any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I would like to thank your office as well as the ethics office for all the hard work that you do.
Thank you so much, and we certainly appreciate your support.
And not to exclude iPro. The iPro is included in that with compliance. My apologies. So thank you, all 3 offices.
I do have a question about referrals and that have been made and policy recommendations. Have we received any responses to those recommendations and referrals?
I will defer to Madam Inspector General.
Of course. I guess I'm responsible for the dirty work. Yes, we have. We received 1 response to 1 recommendation of those 12 recommendations that we issued in connection with one of the matters the Deputy Inspector General Williams just referred. It was a 3-page response, but in some, the recommendation was rejected.
Is that 12 from just this month alone, or was that you had gave us before a long list, like it was a larger number before with no responses?
So those were 12 recommendations that were issued in connection with 1 investigation that closed last month.
Okay. So I guess piggybacking on Ms. Brubaker's comment, how about the ones that have no responses? Have any of them resulted in responses since? We had that. I can't remember.
Since we had the discussion.
Yeah, I can't remember what the number was, but I know it was a high unresponse rate.
Right. That high unresponse rate remains.
And just to clarify, that is from all departments within the city.
That's correct.
Thank you.
So just to ask, when you include the policy and procedure recommendations, is it possible for you to do a little table that says report back or responses or something so that we can see it? You know, like you have the 21 policy and procedure.
So add that to our list of the
Yes, please.
since reported activities? Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
I thought you had in the past. I had been looking for it for the conversation with the mayor's office to get clarity on those open recommendations that had not had responses.
So we include that information on our website, so that's readily available all the time. And we also included that information in our annual report last year and plan to make that an annual inclusion. So they're there, but we have no problem with including that within the reported on activities to date for each board meeting.
Thank you very much.
And if I may, I just want to thank you, board, again for your support of the office and the work that we do.
Thank you.
I've got a question. I know we only got the presentation tonight. The areas of concern section, does that accurately capture your areas of concern? And I'm more than happy to give you my copy so you can go over it.
Well, hold on, before you, are we done with the compliance report? So we just want to make sure that, no more questions for compliance? Okay.
Yeah, you still,
someone? Oh, okay, I thought so. Okay, I just want to make sure that we're done with compliance.
Right, and we still have two other presenters, but very quickly, the short answer is no. No, the listed areas of concern do not in any way capture our office's area of concern, as the board member pointed out in the remarks.
Thank you so much.
Good evening, members of the governing board. Madam Inspector General, would you like me to yield my time? No. I'm just asking. All right, good evening. Felicia Henderson, Director of Information and Outreach for the Office of the Inspector General. I will begin my report this evening talking about community engagement. The Inspector General was invited to appear before two community-based organizations this past period, the Center for Civic Innovation, CCI for short, and the Midtown Atlanta Rotary Club. The common thread in meeting with each of these organizations was basically to introduce the Inspector General to the broader Atlanta community and to give her the opportunity to talk about who the Office of Inspector General is, what we stand for, our functions within the city, and how that benefits the broader community as a whole. She was also invited to give a talk about herself, talk about what led her into this profession, the Inspector General's profession, and to just basically provide more insight on who she is as well. She has also spoken previously with the Atlanta Planning Community Advisory Board, or APAP for short, and we have also started to reach out to the individual NPU units, neighborhood planning units for the city, and make our presence more known within the city through the neighborhood planning units. The Inspector General also received recognition from an organization called the Taxpayers Protection Alliance. They are a nonprofit, nonpartisan group based out of Washington, D.C. She received an honor called Profile and Courage for continuing to fight the good fight on behalf of the citizens of Atlanta and for trying to uphold and maintain an independent office of the Inspector General. There have been Inspector Generals across the nation who have been under fire for standing up for the independence or the structure of the Office of the Inspector General. It is important for the citizens to know that they have an organization that represents them, that can speak basically on their behalf when there are instances of fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption. And because she is fighting the good fight, like so many other Inspector Generals across the nation who touch a nerve within their city's hierarchy. She received that honor, Profile and Courage, and I have copies of that document for you all for this evening. In terms of public outreach, our public outreach campaign, Eyes on ATL, which you all have heard about last year, we continue to roll that program out. Last year, you saw it on web banners for WSB, Channel 11. You also saw as on the MARTA buses. And for those of you who traveled through Hartsfield International, you may have had the opportunity to see those banners on the monitors throughout Hartsfield International. We have expanded our coverage now, so depending on the roads that you traverse within the city of Atlanta, you will see our posters on the MARTA bus shelters across Metro Atlanta. I will round out my report now by talking about our anti-corruption trainings. We continue, well, let's just say we started rolling out this program before I came to the office. I believe they started in 2022, and I picked up the ball in 2023. We conduct these trainings live and in person, face-to-face, for a specific reason, because we want the individuals, the employees across the city to realize that we are not an adversarial agency. We are not there to do the I gotcha thing or we found out what you were doing. We rely heavily on the employees across this city to provide us with the tips and the complaints that they come across. Therefore, we tailor our trainings for each individual department that we are allowed or invited to go into, so that the employees there will understand what fraud, waste, and abuse and corruption looks like within their particular department. We have the members of the compliance investigation team conduct these trainings because they are on the ground. They understand how to display what fraud, waste, abuse, and corruption looks like to John and Jane Doe employee, if you will. We also have the opportunity, by meeting face-to-face, to present scenarios that are tailored to the department, and they're just vague enough so that we can elicit conversation, and sometimes it's been very lively conversation from the people that we present to. And it leads to very interesting discussions and very interesting engagements between our staff and between the staff of the different departments. And we found that once we start to engage with them, they realize that we are there for them and that we can represent their voice and hear their complaints and take their complaints extremely seriously. Let's see, for this past period, we did 10 trainings and we served 263 employees. But over the course of this year, 2024, we have reached over 1,100 employees. And I will wrap this up by saying, in listening to the Chief of Staff's presentation, he mentioned that the mayor's office and over 150 employees, I believe he said, attended an ethics training. I want to be clear, if I may, Inspector General, by making sure that people understand that there's a difference between the ethics trainings and the anti-corruption trainings. And I would like to extend this invitation to the mayor and his executive staff that they allow us the same opportunity to present our anti-corruption trainings to them so that they come to understand clearly that there's a difference between the ethics training and the anti-corruption trainings that we offer. That concludes my presentation. Oh, I'm sorry. There was one other thing that I forgot to mention. I saw something briefly a few weeks ago where the Department of Labor is developing training materials for employees across the city that will provide them instructions on how to respond and engage with the Office of the Inspector General. To my knowledge, this office has not been afforded an opportunity to present or to participate in helping them develop that material. So I'd like to extend an invitation to them as well and offer the ability or the opportunity to partner with them in developing that information. When I started last July, the Inspector General was in the process of presenting a one-page document on the do's and the don'ts of engaging with the Office of the Inspector General. That material was introduced to the mayor and the members of the executive cabinet, as well as the commissioners. So I think that allowing us to have a voice at the table would go a long ways in making sure that the information that the Department of Labor provides to the citizens, the employees across the city, is well-rounded, and it affords the opportunity for all of us to contribute equally to that training. Now that concludes my presentation. Are there any questions? Okay.
No.
Thank you very much. And I'd like to end this by saying, one, it is a pleasure and an honor to work for you. And I thank you all so very, very much from the bottom of my heart for the support that you give to her and you give to this office. Publicly give to this office and the Inspector General. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am Rosalind Anderson. Can you all hear me? Wait a minute. Okay. Hold on.
Yeah.
No? Oh.
You may continue.
Okay. Good evening, everyone, Madam Chair and the governing board members. My name is Rosalind Anderson, and I am here to present the budget reports for the Office of Inspector General. In keeping with the continuity of IPRO and compliance and the anti-training and stuff, I elected to submit the budget reports in a similar format. Well, this year is our first year having our own separate budget. So, and being a department. So what happened in my budget reports, I'm just going to go ahead and say, is that I neglected to put the administration budget report in here as well. So I will correct that and get the corrected copies out to you before the next board meeting, so you'll have a more accurate reporting of what our finances are. And for the compliance division and IPRO, there initially when we, in the beginning of July, when we were getting our accounts budget set up, our allocations were put in the different accounts in operating and personnel, and I've had to go in and just kind of put the monies where they belong. For IPRO, at the time of our board meeting, the personnel expenses hadn't been uploaded yet, so those were just listed as pending allocations. And so when you look at the numbers from last period up until now, that has partly to do with how they did or hadn't uploaded the personnel expenses. But now they're uploaded, and once I add the admin portion of the budget report, then it'll be a better reflection of what we're currently working with. So, and that's basically it. Does anyone have any questions?
I have a couple of questions on the FY24 contracts. Is this
Sure, go ahead.
Okay. And first and foremost, thank you for including it in the format that it's included. Question number one, are there, at this time, do you know any FY24 contracts that are anticipated to carry over into 2025 outside of the two obvious ones? I see Verizon and Xerox. But are there any others anticipated to renew a contract for 25?
The only one that's going, well, when you look at the FY contracts for the OIG contracts for FY24, you'll see that there one for the database systems that was to be determined because we were still selecting a vendor. So now that actually has Carasoft or Apexis, who's the database vendor. But as far as any of the FY24 contracts being extended, the only one that came over into FY25 from FY24 is the accurate. The LexisNexis, doing business as accurate. Those are, and everything else is one that, no, just LexisNexis. That's the only one. All the other ones are contracts that we put in place for this fiscal year.
Okay. And is there any anticipation of some of the categories being bidded for contract in 25 that you use?
When you say categories, what?
So there are a couple. So I see investigative tools, and I see that carries over. And of course, Xerox and Verizon. So case management was awarded, but public awareness campaign, is that?
No, that was just for the 12 months.
Only for the 12 months.
Right. And anything else would definitely go through the same procurement process, and it'll be at the direction of our information officer.
Perfect.
Director.
Thank you again for providing it.
Oh, you're welcome.
For the detail.
Anyone else?
Just quick question, the investigative tools, you're just changing what platforms you're using, is that correct?
Right. There were like when you look at FY25, you'll see that we had Thomson Reuters and Accurate, and those were basically providing a similar type service, and with the addition of Deputy Inspector General Williams, and in her experience, she recognized that there were some more investigative databases that would be more effective for our office.
That makes sense. I'm familiar with the tools, so I was just curious if that was the reason. Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? I appreciate you all. Thank you. I could repeat what everybody said, but you've heard it, and I will just say, y'all made my heart feel good, so I appreciate you all. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So to wrap up the rest of our report on activities, there are no significant changes with respect to our infrastructure. We're continuing to build out, of course, the office. The configuration process for our case management system hit a slight hitch because there was turnover in personnel of our vendor, but we are back working. Yes, it has been frustrating to be delayed, but we're back, and we are now working in a test environment, so we're beginning to see what some of the options and the work that we had put in actually look like in practice. And of course, as always, we're continuing to develop our targeted policies and procedures to supplement our existing policy and procedures, which in themselves supplement our overarching adherence to the Association of Inspectors General Green Book, which has been distributed to you all in the administration. It's been quite a long night, but we still have things to say. So we've heard from the mayor's office about the task force, and our office and the public benefited from hearing directly from the board regarding some of the concerns that you all have regarding the task force, and particularly some of the mischaracterizations of your position and thoughts and communications with the mayor's office. I guess I'd like to say from the outset that our office welcomes the opportunity to present to the task force, to members of the public, to anyone else who has any questions regarding our work. Transparency is the cornerstone of our work, not only in connection with sharing our findings from reviews and investigations, though let's not get too confused about findings, investigative findings versus whatever was meant by findings in the slides, but also transparency with respect to the manner in which we conduct those reviews and investigations. Transparency is a part of public accountability, again, a principle that we adhere to in connection with Green Book standards. We have nothing to hide, and we have much to gain from increasing understanding regarding our work. We're bringing a new function to the city, we understand that, and a learning curve that also might involve some potential nips and tucks to our processes is entirely to be expected. But before that task force meets, I do just want to take this opportunity to briefly share with the board and with members of the public some concerns of our own. To make the distinction, not the areas of concerns outlined, but our concerns, particularly with regard to the process surrounding the passage of the task force legislation, and also about the substance of the legislation. To be clear, none of the issues that I'm about to outline constitute legal infirmities, but there are absolutely points that I would like you, as our board, and members of the public to be aware of, particularly given the emphasis earlier this evening on transparency. Process-wise, just want to highlight a few points. First, the legislation was introduced by walk-in. By its very nature, walk-in legislation limits the opportunity for public engagement. Second, unlike other pieces of legislation that have touched upon the Office of the Inspector General, including the task force that made the recommendation to create the Office of Inspector General, those pieces of legislation have gone through both the Committee on Council and the Finance Executive Committee. Here, the legislation only went through the Committee on Council. And because of that, the legislation was introduced at a meeting at 11 a.m., was passed at that meeting, was then considered at a meeting starting at 1 p.m., and was passed out of full council, all on the same day. With the exception of the mayor's office's presentation and the council's discussion with the mayor's office about the mayor's presentation, there were no comments on the creation of a body to review a new city office performing an oversight role for the benefit of the public. Third, and I can only speak for the Office of Inspector General, but as one of the 3 entities that are the subject of the legislation, we received no notice of the legislation. I'm going to repeat that because, again, transparency was emphasized earlier this evening. We received no notice regarding the legislation. In fact, we only received a copy of the legislation that we had to request from council at roughly 1:30 p.m. that day. So after it had already been passed out of the Committee on Council and after the full council meeting was underway. And we only even knew to ask for that because our wonderful intern in iPro happened to have been looking at the agenda for full council and noticed the item for the walk-in legislation. Fourth, more of us in the office would have seen and had an opportunity to participate in the Committee on Council meeting were it not for problems with the live feed on Watch 26. Now, on other occasions, in the interest of transparency of council proceedings, some committees have opted to postpone meetings when there have been technical problems. That was not the case here. So taken together, as a result of this process, with the exception of the mayor's office presentation and the council's presentation to the mayor, the council's discussion with the mayor's office, there was no public engagement or commentary, let alone from this office, regarding the creation of this body. Turning to the substance, there are so very many points that I would like to respond to. But the hour is late, and I would like to be respectful of everyone's time, and we will pick another forum where we can have a line-by-line addressing of all of the issues, including the new issues that were raised during this evening's presentation. But about the substance, just a few points. The legislation purported to indicate that OIG sought and needed clarity from the mayor's office and city council on how to do our jobs. We did not, and we do not. We appreciate feedback and always endeavor to improve the service that we are offering this city. But we are professionals. with experience performing the work of offices of Inspector General, with training in the work of offices of Inspector General, and has been noted, thank you, Board Member Simmons, with certifications to do the work of offices of Inspector General. Those certifications come from the Association of Inspectors General, the industry organization that advances professionalism, accountability, and integrity in our field, and promotes excellence in the Inspector General community. We routinely consult with our peers from other cities and other jurisdictions, and we seek guidance from AIG. As another substantive point, while this legislation, both as presented on September 3rd and as presented this evening, is purported to respond to the issues of obstruction that we stated, that we said posed an emergency for our office. And just a quick departure here. No, we understand that the emergency facing our office is not COVID. We understand that the emergency facing our office is not individuals being shot in the street and crime rates in this city. We understand that the emergency facing our office is not a water main break. We get that. The emergency that we stated, certainly in comparison to those, I understand why the city attorney would characterize it as a non-emergency, as she did unsolicited during public comment. However, it is an emergency for this office. We characterized it that way for a reason. It wasn't an overstatement. But back to the emergency. This walk-in legislation was presented allegedly in response to our stated emergency, and yet that did not take place, as the Chief of Staff acknowledged, until more than 3 months after we made those statements. Indeed, the mayor's office didn't even engage to schedule a discussion to talk about those issues until 3 months after that public statement. And indeed, that conversation came 2 months after we provided information and documentation supporting why it was that we said that our work was being obstructed. Now, the mayor's office didn't request that directly of the office, but we thought they should have it, and so we provided it by letter in June. Additionally, in support of the legislation, the mayor's office has made a presentation both on September 3rd and here again that contained just so many misstatements, misrepresentations, and mischaracterizations, even some out-and-out, just plain factual errors. There are far too many for us to recount them here, so in the interest of time and for the benefit of the board and the public, let me just dispel 2 of the most serious falsehoods. First, OIG has never denied any employee a personal attorney in connection with our interviews. That has never happened. And yes, as was noted earlier tonight, we don't allow city law department attorneys to participate in our interviews. The conflict of interest in these circumstances, among other issues, is serious and clear. But that's it. I want to say it again because it's important. We have never and would never deny any employee a personal attorney in connection with our interviews. Second, OIG has never conducted a search of any employees' equipment, bags, etc., as was noted in the presentation. If any of our matters reached the stage where we needed to conduct any search of anyone's personal belongings, we would work with prosecutor partners to obtain a warrant. Of course, that is what we would do. We wanted to highlight those particular points because we believe that they have contributed to fear-mongering concerning this office, that they have aided those who might wish to create the misimpression that the office is lawless, that we have gone rogue, and that if given the kind of access and tools that we actually need to do our jobs, we will run roughshod over employees' rights. Nothing could be farther from the truth. Finally, with regard to the substantive issues with this legislation, but perhaps the most significant of the substantive issue, because it speaks particularly to some of the representations that were made tonight about all that could be accomplished by this body. And that issue concerns the time frame. Under the legislation, the task force has only 45 days to complete its work. That means that in 45 days, the task force is to have held its stated minimum of 3 public meetings, that in that time, they are supposed to have gathered all of their facts, to have weighed all of the submissions, to have composed each of its assessments, and then to have issued all of its recommendations. Today is day 16 of those 45 days. Now, this time frame would be challenging for nearly any fact-finding endeavor. To give a little context, that task force for the promotion of public trust that's responsible for the recommendation to create this office, that task force held 5 public meetings over the span of 5 months once it started in its review, and of course that culminated in the recommendation for this office. I've given you material concerning Baltimore County. The Blue Ribbon Commission for Baltimore County that was assembled, and hopefully you hear the parallels here, assembled to review, evaluate, and make recommendations concerning the policies and procedures regarding Baltimore County Office of Inspector General, met 10 times publicly over the span of 8 months. That review culminated in a 200-plus page report that made, among other recommendations, the recommendation that the OIG should be provided with sufficient staffing and increased financial resources, that the Office of the Inspector General be given direct access to materials wherever possible, and that the jurisdiction not create an oversight board to exercise operational control of the office in order to give appropriate deference to the need to protect the independence and decision-making of the Office of Inspector General. But this task was just given 45 days here, and again, we are on day 16. That leads me to the final point that I'd like to make about what opportunity we, and by we I mean collectively we, that's the Office of the Inspector General and certainly the Governing Board, what opportunity we will have to meaningfully engage with this body. OIG asked staff for the task force, i.e. the Mayor's Office, Chief of Staff, and the City Attorney who appeared before you today, to provide information about the meetings of the task force. We waited 1 week. We didn't reach out until September 10th. We asked, would we be given time to present outside of public comment? We asked, were the dates set? And absent set dates, what notice would we receive? What notice would the public receive? We were told, quote, the respective offices and governing board will have an opportunity to engage with the task force. Currently, no meeting has been set. So that was the first response to my initial email, where I'd also asked for any additional information that could be provided. That response did not speak to the question about meaningful engagement something outside of public comment. It was silent as to what form presenting to the task force would take. And outside of saying that no meeting dates have been set, it certainly didn't speak to the very significant question posed regarding notice. So we asked again, certainly following up about notice that we and the members of the public would receive. We were told all meetings will be noticed and conducted in compliance with Georgia Open Meetings Act. Okay. Well, we understand that the Open Meetings Act, given a body constituted in this fashion, is only 24 hours notice. So we, Office of the Inspector General, Governing Board, Ethics Office, would have just 24 hours to prepare. Much more importantly, any subject matter experts that you all have highlighted would be critical to the work of any task force would have just 24 hours notice to provide input. And the public would have just 24 hours notice, potentially, because we haven't been told how much notice we'll actually receive, only that it will comport with the Open Meetings Act, but that it could potentially involve no more than 24 hours notice. So we wanted to flag these issues before these meetings commence. As I've said, we welcome the opportunity to talk about this office. We like doing it in any forum. We are happy to do it before a task force. But the public engagement issues surrounding how the task force legislation was passed and those concerning how it will be executed are significant. I just want to close a little by saying that the Chief of Staff noted at some point in his remarks that he was not going to get overly passionate about the issues in the discussion. Well, I have endeavored to do the same, which I will admit has been a challenge given the tone and substance of so very many of the comments that have been made tonight and those that have been made on September 3rd in our absence. It's also a challenge given the theater of support for the work of this office, including the donning of a Stand with OIG pin. I'd like to end with the observation in response to a comment made by the city attorney with regard to potential changes in the operations of the office. She noted that it would, quote, depend on what type of OIG you want. It certainly does. If the type of OIG Atlanta wants is an effective OIG, then the task force and the public will be served by hearing from experts, as you all have identified, in the actual practice of the work of offices of Inspector General. I'm absolutely happy to answer any questions that you might have about some of these representations that were made today or in the presentation. I recognize the hour. You know that I am available at any point if you have any questions, but certainly I'm happy to do so now and here.
Board members? Any comments, questions?
I just want to reiterate our support of you and your team and your office and the work that they are doing to assure that this city is operating transparently and ethically and legally the way that it should. I'm very proud to sit on this board and say that I work with your team and the ethics office team. So thank you.
Thank you.
Somebody looked like ate this. Sorry, it's gross. I'm trying my very best to be an active listener, and so sometimes it takes me a minute to make all the things make sense and then coherently and intelligently respond. But I'm not at all taking away from my fellow board members about their support for the office. I want to make it very clear, too, that the support is for an independent office. So I think sometimes our job is to think of lawyers. Terry can empathize, is to think of the worst case scenario. And so if you were indeed rogue, we would still support the independence of the office. And so while I think some people have perhaps taken things a little personally, moving away from that and just saying this is not just about you or your office. This is about the independent nature that the Office of Inspector General requires. So I think when we say we stand with OIG, we stand with the independence of your office, regardless of who's in that position. So again, not to take away from any support that has already been shown, I just wanted to make that a little bit more clear and on the record. And then my second thing is, I think sometimes we all get up and I think some people have sound bites to make. I think it's very important to be brave in listening, and also be transparent in your remarks. And so in that regard, I think, what can we do next? These things all the bad things or whatever have already happened. The task force is happening. This is our reality, and I understand perception is reality as well, but this is our reality. How do we move forward? I invite our board members to think, what are we going to do in the next less than 30 days? How do we be prepared in 24 hours? I mean, what do the young kids say? If you stay ready, you don't gotta get ready. I've only heard that. I'm not that young. But, how are we going to do that? I think that's the conversation that we all need to figure out, how we do that with ethics, how we do that with OIG, how we do that. And so that's just my final comment about what we need to do, buckle down in the next less than 30 days. So thank you.
If I may, I'll speak on behalf of the office because we've had enough discussions about this work where I feel confident speaking on our behalf. As we like to say, it's about this work. And so we don't take personally at all the distinction that you've just made about supporting the independence of the office. That's what we're here to make sure happens. That long after any of us are here in this office, we want to make sure that the authority, the parameters, the rules of engagement, which is a term that's been bandied about, that those things are set so that the office can continue to be independent so it can best serve the people of the city of Atlanta. And to the going forward, Jane's opinion, I do think what you've commented about the young folks is exactly right. I think it is a matter of having to stay ready. That you, as a body, and I know certainly on our end, we've started preparing because for all I know, I've missed an email and the meeting is going to be at 7 p.m. tomorrow. I just don't know because we haven't been told, and nor have members of the public. So we just have to get ready.
Board Member Welch.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments, and I am also well aware of the time. I just wanted to add a few clarifications. One, Ms. Henderson, I just wanted to say I didn't get a chance when you were up to say that I've seen some of the billboards. I'm very excited My family thought that was a little odd as I pulled over and said, look at that. Second, because I am the CPA on the board, I am absolutely interested in getting a copy of the specific award from the Taxpayer Protection Alliance. As we've been discussing on next steps, the task force is here. What do we do? I wanted to clarify the discussion we were having earlier during board operations about being sure that the OIG, the Ethics Office, and IPRO and this board are empowered to be good stewards of city resources. And my earlier comments regarding the makeup of the task force, I indicated that we, as a board, have been attempting to address the concerns, and I don't feel comfortable with the characterization of inaction. As Terry mentioned, the areas of concern that were presented today did not list our areas of concern that have been in multiple discussions, and specifically, our board has attempted to create board learning education around these areas of concern that were presented, and it was determined that we don't have the funding or authority on our end to do this. And forgive me, I am 100% sure I am using legalese 100% wrong. I know that I'm not hitting the legalese correctly. But our authorizations for meetings are very specific on what we can and cannot request and do. Therefore, this board's discussions were also involved about legislation and how do we make sure we are all empowered to make the steps that we want to have this type of involvement on all involved. And this constraint in being able to, and being characterized as not taking action, was the catalyst for my comment about the makeup of the task force. Pragmatically, like I said, I know I'm not legalese-ing it, but pragmatically, how does this board create the additional meeting requests, require attendance or request attendance, the logistics of doing such, funding the logistics of doing such when we are constrained to very specific activity? And I'm not seeking an answer to this at this moment, but it's those types of questions that the pragmatic process and procedures that subject matter experts provide guidance on, and that is different than the designing of a world-class OIG and ethics office and IPRO. It's the implementation of how does the office and how do we execute the actual mandates versus just the designing of it. And I think that's what all of us have been trying to articulate more clearly of what the concerns are of the day-to-day, how do you do this? Thank you for the opportunity for the additional clarification, and I'm glad that we are having the heated, involved discussions because we are all on the same page of wanting what is best for the city and making sure that we are all being prudent stewards of city resources. And I think that is why all of us are very involved and active on all sides whenever we're having these meetings or want to have additional meetings and public discussions.
Yeah. So I'm going to also make a comments or statements or something of the sort. Once again, not a legal person, just a chair here. I want to reiterate what the board has definitely said. You know, as a board, our main goal is to make sure that the independence of both the Inspector General and the Ethics Office is intact as it's supposed to be. We are the one thing that the Chief of Staff did say, we are very unique in that aspect. You know, I have been on this board for a while and have met other city groups or boards that either has some type of executive appointee on there or the executive committee is very involved in how the board makeup is, or that either office reports into an executive branch. So we are lucky and unique to be able to have that opportunity. We need to continue that uniqueness, right? We don't need the handcuffs as we stated in our letter. We don't need, you know, the interference of that independence because that can go wayward. I'm going to, one of the things that I've noticed, especially with the work I do within the city and within the state,
is that, especially recently, in our political realm, I constantly see people doing things short-sighted, like the immediate. I know Shannon, you've known me for a while. You've heard me say this. Anything I do and say is about what happens when we're not here. What does it look like when we're not here? So when you do push things legislatively, policy-wise, and it's short-sighted because of the person who's in that office, or you don't like what they do or how they do it, it's a short-sightedness for government and policy and legislation, which is not good government, because it's no longer about the work, it is about the person. So I like to stress that, and I'm going to also make a quick quote that, as they say, growth and comfort do not coexist. So if you feel discomfort because of something that's new, that is because we're growing. And if you want comfort, that means you want to stay stagnant. And so that is what I've been seeing lately, is there's a discomfort. So as a city, we do need to decide, do we want to grow and be better? Do we want to be this mecca that, we keep pushing to be? To do that, we have to grow. And we have to do it correctly and do it right. Since this legislation has been written, that has been my push, that it needs to be right. Right? We don't want to keep doing this year after year, right? We were already here in 23. A lot of the stuff could have been knocked out in 2023. It wasn't. Now we're back at 2024 because people got discomfort. And now they're like, what are we doing? So that's kind of really my overall statement. I just appreciate the work of both offices. Let's get real. Like, it is a lot of work. Investigations, complaints, whatever comes through both offices' doors is a lot of work to do, and to decipher what do we follow, what makes sense. We know there can be frivolous complaints just because it's like, you know what, I don't like Terry's black dress, so you know what, today I'm going to call in a complaint. But that could really come through these hotlines. And you have to follow the facts, right? Is it frivolous? Is it because I just don't like her dress today? And that's the reason why I just said something. It's time and time again. So I know there was a comment about investigations and when we should trigger and stuff like that. That's, when you think about that, that's a whole nother conversation. But anyway, because of the stuff that can come through. Want to clarify too, like Board Member Welch said, the inactiveness and the assumption that we are inactive. I want to make it very clear, if you did not look at that screen, the last communication we have received when we were trying to continue the conversation and move this ball forward was in June. We responded, and I will quote, my response was that neither should this board nor the executive committee should be making legislative changes until we understand and know the day-to-day of what an Office of the Inspector General does, so that we can make sure legislation is working and it is correct. That was the last communication. It was received. Thank you, was the communication we got from that. So inactiveness is not what we're doing. We are working. We're thinking about how do we get trained. We are doing stuff that we can make sure that we are a supportive board. So I want to make sure that's clear. And the second thing I want to make sure is clear is that it was implied that we are not transparent because there's no action. We had this letter that went away, and my brief lookup of the Open Meetings Act was that, yes, our only flaw is that we actually took a vote online. So that was we can basically have communications. We can talk about stuff. We can write a letter if you want to, but bringing it to the board should have been, we did the vote here first before we sent it out. So the transparency on that, I want to make sure it's very clear that we do not do things behind closed doors, and we are trying to follow the Open Meetings Act, the Open Records Act. We try to do everything to the extent it was implied that we were not doing that. And last, well, you know what? We'll let you finish your IG because we have to change the vote. But that was it. So thank you so much. I appreciate it. Sorry.
Thank you. And just, if the board wishes, this would probably be the time to rectify that one issue that you just addressed.
Yes. So thank you. I was going to do that once we closed you out. So also Robert Rules of Order and our legislation piece, thank you Member Lang for pointing that out on our legislation. And let me quote it out first so that I have it on record correctly and not ad-libbing it. So according to our legislation, no member of the board present at a meeting of a quorum of the governing board of the Office of Inspector General and Ethics Officer shall abstain from voting for any reason other than a publicly disclosed conflict of interest. So with that, I do need a motion to reconsider, and it's going to be a part 2 motion on this.
So moved.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
It is open for discussion. I will start the discussion because on both of those motions that we had about the letters, that we had to reconsider it because Mr. Gray abstained to both of those motions. So the reconsider is to redo both of those motions over so they are legitimately on record correctly. So there's that would be 2 motions we got to do because we got to do each individual motion separately as they were originally presented. Is there any other questions or concerns about the statement of legislation? Okay. All those in favor to reconsider both motions to be revoted, say aye.
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 Those object, say nay. Sorry,
Nay.
To reconsider?
Oh, to reconsider.
We got to revote.
In favor.
So, okay. All right. Any abstentions to reconsider? Hearing none, the 2 motions have been reconsidered. We will now open up the new motions. The first motion was about the letter of concern.
Statement of concern.
Statement of concern, yes. I need a motion for that.
I move that we approve the statement of concern addressed to Mayor Dickens and the task force members dated on 9/18/2024.
Okay, it has been moved in second. Is there any further discussion on the letter of concern that was addressed to the mayor's office and task force? Hearing none. All those in favor of submitting the letter of concern to the mayor's office and task force, say aye or say aye. So you said
Aye.
aye. Those opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is passed with 8-1. The next motion is the motion of statement of support.
I move that we vote on the statement of support or letter of support for the Office of Inspector General.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Okay, it has been moved in second. Is there any further discussion on that motion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay.
Nay.
Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion passed 8-1 for the, sorry, it's been a long day with cottonmouth. The motion is passed 8-1 for the letter of support to the Office of Inspector General. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to change those on record for that. Okay, next up, public comments. Nope. Hold on, before you pop up, someone has to announce you. Janet, you know how to do it? Oh, no? Yeah, you could just sign up and then.
Members of the board, we have Amy Stout with a public comment.
Thank you so much. Ms. Stout, you have a public comments is limited to 2 minutes.
Fine. My name is Amy Stout. I am the public that y'all have been talking about a lot tonight. And I am trying to be calm. I feel passionate, so sometimes that undermines my effectiveness, but I'm going to try to keep my temperature down. My name is Amy Stout. I am the chair of Neighborhood Planning Unit N, and I am a member of the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board. I say that not to say that I speak on behalf of those organizations, but to demonstrate my volunteer efforts and my commitment to working to make Atlanta a better place and my care and concern for this city. I wasn't born and raised here. I've only lived here 24 years, but I do feel passionately about multiple issues related to the city and city policies and city government, and this is one of them. And so I've just spent my Thursday night down here. But yes, so all that is to say that I feel strongly, I'm glad to hear that this board, or at least this, all but one of you, strongly support the office, the Inspector General. It's reassuring. I'm glad I learned that tonight. I'm also concerned about these task force meetings. I've been here long enough to know that when you create a task force, it's probably to go and make an end run around something to get without going through the proper policies. But anyhow, I'm glad to hear that this board supports the Office of Inspector General, and I will put on my official hat now and say that as a member of the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board, we did vote in June on a resolution unanimously to support the independence of the Office of Inspector General, and I don't think you realize what that means, that APAB took a unanimous vote on something. So it was something that was overwhelmingly of a concern for these neighborhood leaders from every neighborhood planning unit in the city. That's what the Atlanta Planning Advisory Board is. And so thank you for letting me speak, and thank you for supporting the OIG.
Thank you so much. Are there any other public comments? That's it? Okay. Sure.
I'd just like to make a point of clarification to the comments and make it clear. The reason I did not vote in favor is not because I do not support the OIG. I support the OIG, the Ethics Office, and the independence of this board. I did not agree in the entirety of the contents of the letter that addressed the meetings and availability. So that is my reasoning for voting nay. But I stand in support of the independence, I stand in support of the OIG, the Ethics Office, and this governing board. I did not agree, again, with the contents of the letter as it related to the availability. So thank you. Just want to clarify.
Okay. Based on our agenda, it has been a long night. Public comments. Okay, next governing board of the Office of Inspector General and Ethics Office meeting is scheduled for November 21st, 2024. Next is a motion item.
Make a motion, we adjourn.
Okay, do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Hearing none, the meeting has adjourned. Thank you so much, everyone.